I'm Janet Hutchinson, and hopefully, when I press all the right buttons, you can see welcome to our conference, although it then decided to leap onto my second slide. We at the moment have 100 of you with us. We seem to have a minor problem in that we thought we could take up to 300, and unfortunately anybody above the 100 at the moment isn't getting access. So do bear with us, but that is in line with one of the slides I'm going to be showing you. So at the end of the conference, what we hope the people who are here will have had is an update on the English national landscape, but also in a broader UK, European, global context, and to think about practical solutions for what you can be doing with your career learning. We are very pleased you could join us today. And as I say, we hope you can contribute in a variety of ways through Twitter and chat, etc. What we would ask, please be patient, because as I say, we're not a high-tech company. We're much better than we were a year ago, probably. I returned to this country only at the end of March, having been on holiday to find lockdown, and at that point I'd never used Zoom in my life. Now, of course, here we are running a conference for at least 100 people, so please be patient. Please stay muted if you can. We've already turned off all our phones, but discovered that didn't stop an answer machine going off. Our building decided to have a fire drill, so that could have come across. So who knows what might happen next, but let's hope it's all up to control. I believe we are recording the conference. I certainly hope so. Yes, it is being recorded as I speak, and it will go onto the website, so if people miss it, they'll be able to catch up. There is a chat facility throughout, so you can put things in the chat. I know a lot of you have been talking to each other, telling us what the weather is around the country. It's a nice sunny morning in Lincoln. So you can use that and you can put things on Twitter. This is our agenda briefly. There may be a little bit of flexibility towards the second half. We have two keynotes, Professor Trehuli, who I'll be introducing very shortly, and John Ambrose. And then we have a couple of others from schools that we work closely with, so people very close to the ground. Elaine from Haven in Boston and George from Eton in Windsor. And then we will have a bit of a summary at 12:30, and we will then close the conference by 1. Just a tiny bit of context. What we had hoped was that the revised statutory guidance for England would be out. It isn't yet. We hope that there'd be a new white paper. We do know that there is a revised framework, and we're delighted to have Tristan here to speak about that, and it is now available on the CDI website. We're also a year on, as I say, from the beginning of this pandemic, and we are learning to deal with it and possibly beginning to get back to normal. However, young people will be having internal, in a way, assessments rather than their normal GCSEs. There has been an awful lot of remote and home learning. There are people on furlough off and on since March, April last year, and still continuing to be. But young people's futures haven't gone away, and we are very, very keen to think about them. So sit back or sit up or walk about if you like, we won't know anymore, and listen. We are in Lincolnshire, just in case you don't know. That's the bit called the East Midlands there, and there is how it is. It's a very large county that I moved to 20 years ago, from the Humber to the Wash. And we are now just going to introduce the first of our 4 speakers. Again, we've got Tristan, who I'm delighted to see also carries the title of Professor of Career Education. Career education for a couple of years almost became a dirty word, or a dirty phrase, but it's one I'm very, very passionate about, and we all are here at Complete Careers. Once you've heard from Tristan, we will have a little break. Then we'll hear from John, who is our strategic director. Then, as I say, later on, we will hear from George and Elaine. So remember, you can feed into Twitter, you can put Zoom chat on, you can possibly email if you want, either me or admin. And there is a question and answer session between 12:05 and 12:30. But now, if possible, I would like to stop sharing my screen in a moment and pass over to Tristram, who I hope is in the room with us. Tristan, can I pass over to you, please?
Yeah, I'm here. Let me just share my slides, and we'll crack on. Sorry, what time am I supposed to finish by?
You are supposed to finish, Tristan, by 10:30, and I'll give you a shout about 5 minutes before then, literally.
I'll try and do it, but if I don't know, I'll go on forever. Right?
Okay. Don't worry, I will cut you off if necessary. Hopefully not in your prime, Tristan.
I was in a presentation with one of my colleagues, and she misunderstood that it was supposed to be. She thought she had 2 hours rather than an hour, and
oh my goodness.
So it's always a worry, isn't it? But anyway, I will kind of crash on. So what I wanted to talk about was Gatsby really, and it's I wanted to do a bit of thinking about what Gatsby is, where it fits into the system, and how we move on past it really, or incorporate it into a broader system. And this is going to be in the context of the launch of a new framework which is coming out from the CDI. So I'm going to try and explain what that is, but I will kind of, for anybody who started panicking already, I will start by saying this absolutely is not an argument to say we've got to stop using Gatsby, and the CDI framework is 100% complementary and built to align with Gatsby. It's not something separate. But what I'm going to try and explain, I think, is why we need something else. And I'm also going to think a little bit about Gatsby, because Gatsby's been very useful, but it's also, in a way, it's such a kind of massive thing in our thinking about how we run careers education and guidance in schools, that it's in a way it stood in the way of some other thinking about what we're doing. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So it's sort of moving beyond Gatsby. So why we needed Gatsby, let's start with that. Well, if we remember this guy, if I was in a room, I'm sure I could probably get a boo or a hiss out of some people for showing a picture of Michael Gove. But, Michael Gove was, was Education Secretary in the 2010s, obviously very controversial, had a lot of very strong opinions about education in general, which some people obviously agree with and others don't. In particular, he was not a great fan of careers education and guidance, and did quite a lot of damage to the system, I think. So what we saw was the movement away from the connection service. Now, I can't see the audience, so I can't make a snap judgment about how many of you will have been kind of working in or with connections, but it's obviously it's increasingly now becoming a kind of historic thing that some people know about, and many people, you know, only have heard about. So, but we had really, since the war, we had a series, or a system of partnership between a careers service and schools, which then became Connections and Schools. And that, you know, there are many challenging things about that, but what happened under Michael Gove obviously was the movement of all of the responsibility for this, and without any of the resources, but all of the responsibility for providing resources moved to schools and away from connection services and, you know, or external careers providers. Now, as time's gone on, that's actually shifted a little bit back, but even with things like Careers and Enterprise Company and various other formations around there, but certainly it's true that there's a lot less resource in this area now, certainly dedicated resource from government, than there was in 2010. So Connections, I think, has been quite unfairly vilified. Its positives, I think, are that it was a relatively well-funded service which worked in schools and communities across England. It recognised the importance of interprofessional working, which I think was very important, and it operated within and beyond the bounds of the education system. And that's one of the big flaws of the current system that we have, is that if you're in school and your school is engaged with careers, you can get some great careers support through the kind of Gatsby framework. If you leave school, if you become NEET or you move into unemployment or any kind of reason why you might be out of school, you might find that all of the support that was available to you just vanishes. And then you've got sort of very limited local authority NEET services and so on. Under Connections, that wasn't the case. We had a kind of coherent system that was for young people, regardless of where they were located in and around the education system and employment and so on. But there were, I think, some legitimate criticisms of Connections. I think it was not well enough integrated into schools and colleges, and, you know, not in all cases. There was some really excellent work that went on through Connections, particularly some of the work with quality awards, some of the careers education support work that went on, was very important work. But, you know, there are also many schools where Connections advisors found it difficult to really establish themselves as a kind of key shaper of the school's vision around careers, and were just kind of shuffled into a cupboard and told, you know, you're going to see all of, you know, year 10 today, and you've got 5 minutes each with them. And so, you know, I'm caricaturing, of course, but I think there are some issues in the way that Connections was integrated. And some of those, I think, the new system that we have now has helped us to rethink. It was very vulnerable, Connections, to being brought into the latest kind of government moral panics. So if you look at what happened with Connections, it shifted its focus around quite a few times, partly because government decided that, you know, NEETs were a big worrying thing, and we had to do something about NEETs. And so then the whole service was kind of reorientated into that direction. And I think it also had a design flaw built into it, which kind of played careers education and guidance off against other forms of support for young people. So, and people who worked in Connections at that time often talked about, you know, in some connection services that were more strongly rooted in youth work, the careers became a kind of a dirty word. So I'm not going to go on about this for too much longer, because, you know, it is history, but it's important to, I think, know where we came from. Now, at that time, I was writing lots and lots of papers, which were basically all could be subtitled as I bloody told them. And I was trying to make the point at that time that cutting huge amounts of services, removing the connection service, was a bad thing to do, and so on. Now, you know, that work, my kind of work and campaigning and writing around that period was not tremendously effective. But I think what we did do, the group of us who were all involved in those kind of campaigns, and there'll probably be many people listening today who were involved in those campaigns, was we did keep the profile up, which ultimately, once Michael Gove went, meant the government started to think about new ways to move forward. Now, one of the things that happened at that time was we started to think, what might a new system look like? And that new system was conceived under kind of considerable constraints. It wasn't, we knew that there was not going to be a chance to go back to the kind of arrangements that we'd had under connections. The government wasn't going to put large amounts of money in it. So what could we do? Well, at this point, John Holman came into my life and into the life of all of us, I suppose. And he had been a science teacher and then a head teacher and then run the National STEM Centre and been very involved in science education and advising government on science education. As part of that, they started to think about, how do we make sure science education really does its work when it gets into the labour market? So how do we get people to choose to take more science options? And how do we get people who have science options to choose to take science careers? Well, inevitably that led them to careers, which led them to ultimately to John to coming to work with us at the University of Derby, and we worked with him, supporting him on this Gatsby review. So what did the Gatsby review do? Well, I think what we tried to do with it was to summarise existing evidence and good practice. And John's great genius really in this was that there was no point in writing reams and reams and academic treatises and things like this. Schools and head teachers were going to need 8 things, or ideally we would have liked it to be less, but we ended up with 8 benchmarks. And so something that could fit on one sheet of paper that says, what should you do? And that was brilliant, because it allowed us to present this evidence and to present a model of good practice in a way that could be understood by everybody in the sphere, even by head teachers, and even by policymakers. Because up until then, when people had said, what does good career guidance look like, I'd often given them a kind of quite long answer about, there's this bit of evidence and this bit of evidence, and there are things we don't know. John understood that was too ambiguous and we needed a much more straightforward answer. And he said, you just need to do these 8 things. If you do those, then you're doing it. And that was very powerful, I think. So everybody here will be very familiar with the Gatsby benchmarks, but it's worth, I think, just briefly going through them again for a bit of fun. The way I see them is like this. So I think what the Gatsby benchmarks tell us is that careers programs need to be established and coherent and rooted in the school. They need to not change every year. They need to have a kind of clear program that students know about, the parents know about, that employers know about, and so on. And that year on year, that doesn't want to be reinvented. So you can sometimes see schools that do really great things, but they're all very ad hoc. No, it needs to be a stable careers program. And then, of course, it needs to make use of career and labour market information. You can't talk about career without understanding what's going on in the labour market. It's just nonsense. You need to understand what jobs there are, what courses there are, what the relationships are between these things. You then need some sort of to recognise the specifics of individuals, and also to think about things like how you might stereotype and so on, and challenge those things. Now, benchmark 3 in many ways is the kind of weakest conceived of the benchmarks, but its heart actually is a very important thought, I think, which is you need good record keeping. That if schools are going to do this stuff well, they need to know who's got what and what those people want from life and how they're going to work with them. So I think actually the core idea of benchmark 3 really is that we need to have some kind of understanding of what's happening. We need good record keeping. We then need to link it to curriculum. We need encounters with employers, experiences of the workplace, and the same for further and higher education. And then we, of course, need personal guidance to help bring it all together. So that's our Gatsby benchmarks. Tremendously useful, very, very clear, and it's given us a lot. It's given us, I think, a kind of a roadmap to help us find our way around, even if you're not somebody who's got a strong background in this. So if you become careers leader, Gatsby gives you a way of moving forward and helping you to kind of think through this. It gives us a blueprint for what the provision in a school should look like. It's not abstract, it's very concrete. Okay, you've got to, you know, bring this many employers in, you know, so you've got to have someone who comes in for every year group and so on. It's very, very clear. Doesn't give a lot of room at its kind of base level for creativity. It says you should do these things. Now that can be very helpful. It can also be a little constraining. I would argue Gatsby is a kind of a minimum standard, so there is actually quite a lot of room to innovate on top of that, but nonetheless, that's what it does. And the other thing that it gave us, I think, was a measure. So we now know how across the country, the number of benchmarks is changing. So we know that the average school now is meeting almost half of the Gatsby benchmarks. Whereas when we started with all of this, it was meeting only a couple of them. And ultimately it gives us a common language, and it's a common language which, as I've said, and this is an important part of its value, is it gives us a common language that unites head teachers, teachers who are not specialists in this area, policy makers, but also, of course, careers professionals as well. And it gives us a way of having a meaningful conversation between ourselves. So that's great. Gatsby, I've been an advocate for it. I was involved in the beginnings of it, and therefore bear some responsibility for its both strengths and its shortcomings. But I think it's worth us spending a little bit of time thinking about what it doesn't offer. So there's, of course, a massive elephant in the room here, which nobody really likes to talk about too much, but it's very simple, is that Gatsby doesn't come with any resources. There's no money attached to Gatsby. And what is clear to me is that one of the big reasons why Gatsby has not been successful, in the sense that we're not in a position where every school is delivering all 8 benchmarks, it's because there's not resourcing for it. So there are some areas in Gatsby which require serious resources for schools. Not big in terms of the whole school budgets, but they do require some resources. If you're going to have a careers advisor in, they're going to see every pupil twice during the time that they're at school. And probably they need, for some people, might need a little bit more than that as well. You've got to pay that person. If you want to do work experience properly, you need to be going out and doing health and safety checks and building relationships with employers, all of that sort of stuff. That requires, again, either you've got to get someone to do that, or you've got to contract with an education business partnership or whoever. And there are many other areas as we look across the Gatsby framework where there is a need for resource, and not thinking about resourcing it properly is one of the kind of biggest failings that the government has had. So I will say it very clearly here, a genuinely world-class career guidance system needs to be resourced properly. Now, that's not to say that nothing can be done without more resources, but essentially schools are in a position where they're moving money from one place to another. And I think we shouldn't be comfortable, and we shouldn't be willing to accept that the average school is only meeting half of the Gatsby benchmarks. We wouldn't be happy and comfortable to accept that the average school is only teaching half of the maths curriculum. So we shouldn't be happy with that. And so we need to resource it properly. And we need to be clear that over the next few years, the demands on school budgets are going to increase. A lot of schools have stored up a lot of problems through the pandemic, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to try and move back to normal, as quick as possible. Now, there's lots of other things that need, and I'm very much in favour of schools having more resourcing for catch-up and so on for the academic curriculum. But there also needs to be some specific resourcing that makes sure that careers doesn't drop off of the agenda. So that's that, but let's think a bit more broadly. So when you think about it, there's quite a lot of other things that are missing from the Gatsby benchmarks. So I thought perhaps we might just ask, if perhaps in the chat, if there's something that bothers you that isn't in the Gatsby benchmarks that you think really should be there, just pop it in the chat now, and we'll see what kind of things people come up with. Okay, so we've got engagement with parents, learning outcomes, governors, governors. There's nothing in there really, but I think there are some mentions of governors in it, but perhaps you could imagine a stronger role for them. Any other thoughts from people? Yeah, careers education as a kind of subject in its own right, rather than embedding it in all subjects. I mean, I think we need both, but that's a good example. Evaluation, I mean, there's a bit on evaluation in there, but yeah, we could probably have more on that. More local cooperation are coming thick and fast now. Impact measurement, not just destinations, employability skills, some recognition of context, discrete careers education. Again, we've got lots and lots of ideas coming out here. That's great. Accountability, interesting. So absolutely, I agree with a lot of those things. I've pulled out some of the ones that I think are most missing here. I'm not going to go through these in huge details, but unsurprisingly, I've put almost the same thing as David just wrote. So careers education as a subject in its own right, as you know, core careers education provision, that would be one thing that I would like to see. I think actually more on assessment and the role of careers assessment as well. So career assessment being things like interest inventories and that kind of thing, but also actually assessing career learning. There's no thought about that really. Digital delivery wasn't really covered there. It's become incredibly important since. Portfolios and reflections, parents and family involvement. Students as partners in this, I think it doesn't have a very strong role for the students. There's a bit about evaluating students, community involvement. There's nothing really about entrepreneurship and self-employment. And this is just a list, and there's many other things that we could actually include in this as well. So, but you know, frameworks don't necessarily have to include everything. There's all of those things that we're talking about there. It is possible for us to still do those things if we think they're important, and to add them onto the Gatsby benchmark. And there is a danger, and I think this is one of the things that John Holman really taught me, is that if you say, well, there are 76 really important things that schools should do, then it's very easy for schools to turn off from that. So if you say there are 8 things, then that's still quite a lot, but okay, yeah, we'll engage with that. So we need to think a bit about that. But what I do think is that there are 2 really big issues that are more kind of fundamental about what's missing from the Gatsby benchmarks, and they are who and why. And the who question, in a sense, we have addressed, and Gatsby have been very involved in addressing. David Andrews, who's here today, has written a lot on this, and we've worked on this as well. And we've come up with the answer that who, at least the kind of primary and most important who is responsible for this area, is the careers leader. And you know, just in case you haven't seen it, we've done a book on this, so you could have a look at that if you want to get into these issues around careers leadership more. But there's quite a bit more to do on careers leadership, I think, and this is not the main focus I want to take today, but I think it is worth saying is that what Gatsby doesn't have is a very strong kind of professional framework. It's very operational. It says schools should do this, but it doesn't really think about, well, how do we build improving practice? And that's about professionalism. That's about having someone who cares about this over the long run. So we need to, I think, formalize and clarify the role of career leader. We need to provide more time, money, and recognition for careers leaders. We need a long-term approach to training professionalization. I mean, we've got some good innovations at the moment with initial training, but then that needs to be thought about over the more long term. And I think there also needs to be greater amounts of clarification and communication about the relationship with the wider careers profession. And certainly one thing that I would argue is that initial training in careers for careers professionals should essentially train people to be a careers leader, amongst other things. So it should give people more capacity to develop curriculum and that kind of thing. But this leaves us then with the why question. So that's going to take us on to the where next, and it takes us onto this CDI framework. So we need a vision of what we're actually trying to achieve for young people. Gatsby tells us how to do it, but it doesn't tell us why we would ever bother doing these things. It leaves that pretty implicit, really. So there are many ways we could think about this why question, but because I'm sort of an educator primarily, I think about it as about, well, what do we actually want people to learn? You know, people are in education, they're in school, they're engaging in activities as part of that. What is it we want them to learn? And career learning ultimately needs some learning outcomes, just the same as any other area in a school or any other area in the curriculum. So Gatsby then tells us how to organise delivery. We've then got the Cdi framework, which tells us what the learning outcomes of career development should be. And learning outcomes has become a phrase that we just throw around, but we need to think about what it means. It means, what do we want to happen once somebody is engaged in this learning? What do we want them to know? What do we want them to be able to do? How do we want them to act? And so on. So we've run a project with so this is the Careers Education Community, CDI, Community of Interest for Careers Education, or COIS, as I've learned to call it. We've been through this project, we've talked to lots of experts, we've done practitioner consultations and run surveys and read stuff, and done lots and lots of engagement with this kind of core group, and me kind of doing a lot of the running around. And what I'm going to show you now is what we've come up with through this. And the idea of this was to rework the Cdi framework into something that was new and contemporary and that complemented the Gatsby benchmarks. So what we've come up with are 6 learning areas that are the heart of what we think careers education and guidance should be about developing in individuals. It's what we want to achieve. It's the why. So why would we, do this delivering careers education in a subject, or bringing in employers, or taking kids to universities to show them what a university looks like? Why would we do all of that? Well, we would do it to achieve these 6 things. The first thing is that we want people to understand that to be successful in their career, they need to grow throughout life. They need to engage in education. They need to reflect on themselves, their background, their strengths, and so on. They also need to be good at researching and exploring possibilities. They need to understand labour market information. They need to think about how they go about finding out how workplaces work, and what's the culture of different workplaces they might go into, and so on. They need to actively be able to manage their career, to make the most of opportunities, learn from setbacks, that kind of thing. They then need to create opportunities, both by being kind of proactive, and that's things like entrepreneurship and so on, but also through building positive relationships, taking advantage of chance opportunities, all of that sort of stuff. So that's another area, the ability to actually create opportunities, not just to explore what's out there, but create them for yourself. And then career is not just about work, it's about balancing life and work. And so you need some of the skills to help you reflect on, are you happy? How are you balancing the different roles that you have to fulfill in your life? All of that sort of thing. And then finally, we think that people who are successful in their career have an understanding of the big picture. They can see that changes in the government's policy around COVID, for example, might lead to jobs moving in one area or another. And they have an opinion on these things, and they perhaps have some ideas about how they might influence the big picture itself, but they're certainly aware of it and seeing how it might actually impact on their life. And then we also, so the skills is probably what most people will focus on when we're talking about this framework, but we've also tried to think about how is this learned? Again, Gatsby gives us a series of activities. It doesn't really give us a pedagogy. So it doesn't really think very deeply about how people learn. It just says, do this, do this, do this, do this. Now, actually, there is an implicit pedagogy that sits underneath Gatsby that we've tried to bring out here. So what this we call it the career learning spiral. What it says is that at the first level, the thing that you need to do is people need to understand that there is career, that career is something that they need to spend time and energy on. They need to then encounter information. Gatsby's got quite a lot to say about finding information, but also about having experiences. Again, Gatsby is very experiential. And we need to then reflect on that learning that you've done through your information and your experiences. You need to build your understanding through that, develop your plans about the future, but also reflect on yourself and develop your own strengths and put all of that into practice. And actually, this is a spiral. So although you're carrying on developing, you're getting better and better at this, as you go into new challenging circumstances, you're going to need to learn more. So we imagine this as a spiral curriculum where these 6 areas that we've just talked about, come round time and time again, but get progressively more sophisticated. So we've mapped, this is designed as a lifelong framework, but we've mapped it onto the Gatsby benchmarks for schools and colleges. What that mapping does is say, what should we be doing? How do each of the Gatsby benchmarks contribute to the delivery of these outcomes? And so that's then there for you to look at. And then we've also gone into more detail in each of these areas and mapped them across the key stages. So key stage 3, key stage 4, and the post-16 key stage, for post-16 phase. And there's a whole bunch of publications which are now available on the CDI website, which I'd encourage you to explore, which go into more detail, which give you more resources, give you case studies of how other schools have done these kinds of things, and give you the background and all the research and so on that goes behind it. So let's think about moving on. So this is the system I think that we have now. And this is not new, but I think it's useful to try and be clear about it. So Gatsby tells us what to do. It's an approach to delivering careers education and guidance. The CDI framework gives us the learning outcomes. Why are we doing all of that stuff? What do we want people to learn? But also a learning model, a way of thinking about this that helps us in the development of new curriculum and thinking about what might also make a difference beyond Gatsby as well. The careers profession then is made up of careers leaders and careers advisors who are responsible for delivering this. And we could go beyond that and think that, we could talk about the careers workforce, which we might include classroom teachers and so on in that. So that's the who's delivering it. And then we also have, and I said that there was this, we lost the partnership model when we lost connections, but actually we have got a kind of a partnership model that's come back, which is the CEC and the careers hubs and the support and coordination and community of practice that they offer to this. Now that their role is much, much smaller than Connections' role was, but it's still an important part of this picture. And I think one thing that is very important if we're going to have a careers system is that it's not entirely school-based, that there are people looking outside, thinking about the labour market, thinking about research and so on. So there's a lot to recommend this system, but it does need to be dynamic and change. It can't just be fixed and for us to say that that's what, that this is the system and it's never going to develop. And I think that was one of the things that was most disappointing about the recent white paper, was that it really had no new ideas about how this system should develop. But what we definitely need to do is move away from the kind of approach that we've had before. And, in my lifetime, I've seen this, well, I guess twice really, in that we saw the old careers service kind of smashed up really and turned into Connections. And in many cases, that was a fairly challenging and difficult period for many people. And then we saw the Connections service completely smashed into non-existence in many, many places, certainly as a national service, and then a kind of period, and then the recreation of it all at Careers and Enterprise. And I was at Careers and Enterprise at the beginning of that. I worked there for a while, and it was often a process of trying to recreate things out of nothing because the existing system is smashed. So I'm not in favour of that. I think we need to adopt a gradual sort of development of the processes and gradual development of the system that we have. But that does mean us thinking about how we move the system on and make it more dynamic. Now, I'm really in favour of Gatsby continuing to be part of it, but it can't kind of exist in its present form forever and ever. So one of the things that I think is most important in that is we need better governance for this. At the moment, schools piece together all of these different elements into a coherent system. So that system I described is not, you know, that is not, there's nobody who sort of oversees that. I suppose the government do in a way, but at a very arm's length. So really it's schools that piece that together. And we need to, I think, move away from that and have a kind of clearer sense of this is what the expectation is and so on. But if we're going to have that system, it does need governance. We can't really have a situation where, well, some of our system is regulated by the professional association, some of it's regulated by government, some of it's regulated by a particular charity. A lot of it goes on at local authority levels. That's the way that you get a lot of fragmentation. That's where you get a lot of overlap. So we need a kind of clearer structure that pulls these things together and gives us an overarching governance for the whole system. So the current system, I think, gives us a lot of tools. It's obviously up to you how you use them in your school. And I think hopefully what I've tried to argue is that the Cdi framework that we've developed over the last year, and which is launching this week, so you're one of the first people to hear about it, it adds some powerful new tools that should help you and your school and the young people that you work with to make better sense of the rest of this stuff. It gives us something that is not just operational. It gives us something that is a vision. It's hopefully inspiring. It gives us an idea about what young people should be able to do that's different, not just deliver this, deliver that, deliver the other. But this is a journey and not a destination. So what I would like to see is this stuff going forward. The CDI resources that we've released this week are not the final kind of things that we'll ever say about this. There's lots more work to do on this that I'm, really excited to be part of. But I think also schools will need to take, careers professionals and experts will need to take forward and develop and think about how they rework. And the system as a whole needs to keep developing, because I think if we can do that and you can embed that in your school, we actually have the chance of it achieving the aims that we hope that it will achieve, of making young people who are more able to play a full role in their community, in the society, in the labour market, and also having that ultimate sort of aim of linking education more fundamentally with society and with the economy. So I'm very happy to talk to people more about this. I'm happy to take questions if there's any time and people have got any questions. If you want to get in touch with me, then you can email me. You can find me on my blog. I'll put these slides up on the blog sometime next week, probably. And also on Twitter, I'm pretty active as well. You might even find me on LinkedIn from time to time. And that's all I've got. So thank you to everyone for listening. If there's questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise,
thank you so much, Tristan. You've done absolutely brilliantly on your timings. Have anybody got any questions? We do have 5 minutes, but before that, may I just apologise to the 38 or so of you who couldn't get in for the beginning of Tristan's speech. We had a bit of a technical issue, which if you had have been here, I did point out we can be prone to, but we managed to sort it. And if you missed the beginning, you didn't miss it irrevocably, because we can provide a recording of it, and as Tristan says, he'll be putting slides up, we'll be ensuring you can get that. But anybody got any questions before we have a short screen break? I was trying to follow chat, and there didn't seem to be any very specific ones. Do keep thinking, what do you want to know? How do you want things to change? Or, sharing.
Yeah, there's
questions. Do you know someone? It is a careers leader should do the role full time. Now, there's a very interesting question. How much time, Tristan, do you think a career leader needs to do their job?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's very difficult because obviously it varies from school to school and so on, and exactly what the job, and there are different ways to organise the job, which David and I have written about, that you know, you can spread the job out more and so on. But certainly, I think, when we wrote some of the documentation around this, we used a phrase which was something like, careers leaders need time to do their job, and that time should be measured in days rather than periods. And I think that is right. So I think it's very clear to me that the 2 or 3 free periods a week is not sufficient for this. But I think whether it needs to be full-time in every school, I'm not sure. I mean, it certainly wouldn't do any harm. I think there is a case that in some schools I've seen where you've got a good careers advisor who combines some of their work as a careers advisor with some careers leadership roles. That can work very well, and then that often can be organised as a permanent role. I mean, you know, I suppose I would like to see the DfE publishing some guidance on minimum standards for it, and not only in terms of actually time, but also in terms of pay and reward and recognition and so on. But yeah, that would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I did notice a couple of other questions coming through. Rather than give them specifically to Tristan now, because the poor man's only really got 2 minutes to answer us. You're staying for the panel, aren't you, Tristan? So if you have a look, there's one about local authorities' responsibility, one about what do people think about the difference between, or whether the one person should be doing the guidance and the career leading. You've obviously referenced a different model. All those are relevant. It'll maybe give you a bit of time to pull some thoughts together that you can then contribute at 12:05, if that's okay. So we're going to give people a short 10-minute screen break, enough time to go to the loo and have a cup of tea, or well, not necessarily drink it, but make your tea or coffee. And then we will come back. Just leave your mics off and your cameras on, but stay in the meeting. And John will be our next speaker up. So again, thanks very much, Tristan. That was really great. Excellent start, and apologies to those who missed the first bit.
Great.
Okay, I will indeed. Welcome back, everybody. It's 10:40 and we are now going to, we hope, see John sharing his screen. Many of you will already know John. John and I have worked together for a long time and have been part of Complete Careers as a company now for over 5 years. We are happy to be hosting this conference along with other colleagues and very pleased that Tristan was able to come. John's been slightly stymied by no new statutory duty, but John, please take to the floor, and you know me, I'll shut you up if you're going on too long.
I'm sure you will. Thanks, Janet, and welcome everyone. Just want to start by extending my apologies really for those that have experienced problems this morning. You know what we're about at Complete Careers. We're small, we're passionate, we believe in what we do. We aren't IT experts, I'm afraid, but and I think obviously best laid plans and all that. The Zoom account was absolutely fine to accommodate up to 300, but for some reason we've got this problem at 100. So thank you for bearing with us. Thank you for your patience. We will be in touch with those of you that have had experienced problems, and we'll see if there's anything we can do to offer to recompense for it, because we know it's a free conference, but we know your time isn't free, and a lot of you have had to book time off to be able to attend this. So bear with us, and we will make amends. So anyway, I'm talking to you today about To Infinity and Beyond. And I'm afraid it's me you've got to blame for this such a cheesy theme, Infinity and Beyond from the Toy Story. But I thought, to be honest, it just really fitted quite nicely, really, with where I think we're up to at the moment with the national position for careers. So in this session, I'm going to be talking about what we should be doing. So looking at the statutory guidance, the focus, and I'll explain a little bit more about why I've labelled that as Infinity. I'll also be looking at what we should be doing, but what we should be doing, putting the learner first then. So, and that's I've labelled more as Beyond. I'll then also be looking a little bit more about what I see perhaps potentially as the issues and the gaps in the careers focus in schools and colleges at the moment, reviewing what progress we're making so far, and starting to look ahead, starting to think about what hints and tips have we already got about what we can expect in the new statutory guidance, and starting to get the crystal ball out as well to think about what other things may we also expect. So let's just start by just accepting where we are at the moment then. So there is statutory duties out for careers. It was introduced in January 2018, updated in October 2018, and it mainly is filled around kind of like there are 4 musts in the whole of the document, and the first and 3 of them are recorded there on the first 3 bullets. So that's about making sure that schools and colleges are providing access to education and training providers. So making sure that they know the full range of opportunities at all the transition points. Making sure that schools and colleges are publishing the name and contact details of the careers leaders on the websites, publishing their careers programs on the website, but also the statutory duty is largely filled around the expectation that all schools should, that one's not a must, it's a should, meet all 8 Gatsby benchmarks by the end of 2020. Now, we're clearly outside of 2020 now, and so therefore, you know, the statutory guidance is out of date and needs to be updated ASAP, and we can expect that to be updated ASAP too. So obviously we know what the Gatsby benchmarks are now. We explored those a little bit with Tristan earlier on, so I'm not going to go through them in any detail because I'm sure a lot of you can recite them in your sleep. What I will say though is I've been working in careers now. This is my 20th year, and you know, again, following on from what Tristan was saying, I've not seen anything before in that time in 20 years that's captured the imagination more so than the Gatsby benchmarks have done in careers education in schools and colleges. And I think that probably largely is what Tristan was saying about Sir John Holman's approach there at the start, which is about making it clear and making it easy with 8 key things there. And looking at each of those 8 things, there's not a single one that I could personally argue and say, well, that's not important or that's not relevant. So it's great that we've got that. What I want to look at, though, is a little bit about 3 slides to show a bit more about what else the statutory guidance says then, but more on quality assurance. So first of all, the current statutory guidance, paragraph 16, says that for quality assurance, it's basically use compass. So there's a mechanism set up that works to be able to help review your progress towards meeting those 8 Gatsby benchmarks by the end of 2020. It's clear, it's robust, and there's support available through your enterprise coordinators to be able to help to achieve that. And even here, back in 2018, when the statutory guidance came out, over 3,000 schools and colleges have done so. And obviously now more and more schools and colleges have also done that too. So, and we've got the Compass tool and we've got Compass Plus to help us with those interactions and to kind of like record and monitor the different encounters and experiences and all kinds of things. In the same statutory guidance, a few paragraphs later, paragraph 20, we've kind of got the stage 2 of quality assurance, which is saying the government strongly recommends that all schools work through the updated quality and career standard. So that's the single national award for career development in this country, which incorporates Compass and incorporates Gatsby and support the development of their careers program. So it's kind of stage 1, have a go at Compass. Stage 2, look at the national award to be able to engage with that and to look at the Compass stuff and get external validation, but also to look at things beyond the Compass and the Gatsby elements. And there are, it's like GCSEs and exam boards. So there's one GCSE, there's one quality and career standard. There are different providers of that. And we're a provider of that, a national provider of it through Complete Careers and CareerMark. The third part to the QA is that in the statutory guidance, the current statutory guidance, there's a role there for Ofsted to be able to hopefully to include in their inspection framework. And all I've done there is just summarised from the grade descriptor documents from the Common Inspection Framework about what's deemed as being inadequate at the moment for career development. So, so obviously high quality careers. So enabling pupils to get access to unbiased information, potential next stops, high quality and opportunities for encounters. So if they don't do that, it's inadequate. And I think that's quite powerful. I just also want to introduce this notion of that runs across the whole of the Ofsted framework now, which is these 3 I's that I think most of us are familiar with, and that's intent, implementation, and impact. And personally, I think they work beautifully with a careers program to make sure that there is a clear intent to everything we're doing, there's implementation, and there's impact. And we'll come back to that as we go through. Now, the question is it working? So this is the statutory guidance. This is the focus at the moment nationally. So is it working? Well, let's start with what the data tells us then. So first of all, we know this comes out, by the way, every year, either October, November time. It used to be called the State of the Nation Report. It's now called Careers Education in England Schools and Colleges. So it's published by the Careers and Enterprise Company, and it's basically aggregating the data that's from Compass tools that schools and colleges are doing up and down the country. So what we can see there is that we've got a national average of 3.75. So schools and colleges on average are meeting 3.75 of the 8 benchmarks, 100%. So, I mean, the short answer, if you're being crude, I guess, from a DFE perspective, to monitor DFE's performance with their expectation is, it's kind of not gone far enough with that. And so it's supposed to be all 8 benchmarks by the end of 2020. We're at 3.75. And I think largely things like the funding, the elephant in the room kind of thing, and also some other factors, which I'll come on to in a moment, are going to be the main reasons as to why we haven't been able to improve on that. But what this data does tell us is that, or doesn't tell us, should I say, is that that figure has improved year on year. So that, you know, we've gone from an average of 1 up to 2 and to 3.75. And we're starting to see some cross correlations here. So things like, for example, careers hubs. So those that have been established from the first wave, 2018, there's a significantly higher score there. And obviously those that are a year behind is also looks like it's going in a similar direction. But what I'm interested in just highlighting for a moment there is some omissions to these correlations. To start with here, so this is the first State of the Nation report at the end of 2017. And it was saying here that the data shows from the Compass assessment that schools that have the quality and career standard performed significantly better than the schools without one, you know, the national award. Okay, let's fast forward a year on to the end of November 2018 and the State of the Nation report there. And this was really strong in terms of the language here. The strongest correlation with a higher overall benchmark score was schools and colleges that had sought and achieved the quality and career standard. It later said, this provides a strong indication that the impact of the quality and career standard is a real one and cannot be explained through chance or by any other factors. So fast forward on to the end of 2019. Fast forward on to the end of 2020. This isn't a problem with the slides, by the way. It just wasn't there. There was no mention whatsoever with the quality and career standard. It just was omitted completely from the reports, despite it being the strongest correlation. So there's question marks there, especially as, you know, as a licensed awarding body for the national award, you know, looking at our own data, all the assessments we did throughout 2020, our own average score is 5.44 of all the schools and colleges that achieved the quality and career standard through our approach throughout that period. So there's some reasons there to be optimistic then. So, well, we're moving forward with, you know, the data tells us that it's progressing, and there are factors that really help and contribute towards that. But also, it's also accepting, of course, that the success of Gatsby and the DFE is more than just the data. And that's really something that I want to be stressing on now for a good part of the next part of this talk. Okay, so that leads me nicely onto the first issue, as I see it at the moment with the state of play. And that's, we've got the Gatsby benchmarks, but where is the careers learning at the moment on the agenda? The focus of the agenda at the moment is on what schools should be doing rather than the knowledge, skills and attitudes young people should be developing to enable them to be effective career planners and make successful transitions. And I think that's vitally important to accept. This was a mission that was quite obvious from the start, but 3 years on, we're still no further forward with this in terms of policy level kind of thing. And it's still not part of Gatsby. So we'll come on to that. And what we see here is when we do the quality and career standard assessments up and down the country, without that, you know, with the focus being on Gatsby, you know, purely on Gatsby and not making sure that the career learning is the center of it kind of thing, and that young people are developing their knowledge and skills and understandings along the way, we start to see that we're missing the point slightly. So young people getting all these experiences, they're getting all these encounters, they're getting all the trips and speakers, but they're not afforded the opportunity to make sense of it and to help them to be able to develop their career planning. So before looking at the statutory guidance then and looking at the progress we've made, you know, being some way off still from meeting those all 8 Gatsby benchmarks, that's the infinity for me, because we're still some way short of that. But what we need to be doing is to be going beyond infinity towards making sure that the learner is at the center to all we're doing in our careers programs. And again, bringing back that language from Ofsted of thinking intent, implementation, and impact, we're not going to be too far off there. So what I mean by that with the intent is making sure that these learner outcomes, the aims of what we're trying to do, is at the heart of everything that happens in our careers program. And by doing so, we can really start to plan our careers program implementation so that it's robust, so that it's coordinated, and it's not this splattergun approach. And only then can we actually start to see if it's having the right kind of impact. So we've got careers frameworks, and it's not to say in any way that one is more important than the other, because every single one has their place. The Gatsby benchmarks, as I said before, have changed the landscape in careers more than anything I've ever encountered in 20 years working in careers. So they certainly have a place. There are 8 benchmarks. They're nice and clear about what it is we're supposed to do, but those are outputs for the school. What we need to combine that with is the learning outcomes for the students, the pupils, the young people, to put them first, to make sure that all the things that we're doing is derived around helping them to improve their knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So, and that's where we're starting to hear that this message then coming through about hitting the benchmarks, but possibly missing the point. So, you know, we can be meeting all 8 Gatsby benchmarks, but we might still not be doing all we can to be providing a good quality careers program, because we're not putting the learner first, and we're not seeing the threads going through the curriculum from year 7 through to 13 to be developing these competencies along the way. Also, things like the quality and career standard, therefore, is the third element of that, and that's the way in which you can pull it all together. Everything you need to be doing to pull together, and you can look at doing it in a continuous improvement fashion, and obviously giving you the opportunity to get external feedback, external validation, and a reason to celebrate to stakeholders too. Now, Tristram's spoken about the new Cdi framework, and you know, I've put it up there. I pinched Tristram's slide on this one, sorry Tristram, but only because that infographic for me is fantastic. It's clear, it's clean, it's something that's not designed necessarily for young people to engage with those kind of infographics, but why not though as well? I mean, these 6 parts here are things that if learners can have the opportunities afforded to develop their knowledge, skills, and attitudes in these 6 areas throughout their schooling, then they're going to be there, they're going to be fine, and they're going to be better prepared to be able to make successful transitions and be good career planners. So it's fantastic that we've got them. I'm thrilled to bits with the progress that's been made here, and we're ever so thankful for all the work that Tristram has been doing. And Janet College and I will be working on picking up the framework and adapting it down to Key Stage 2, Key Stage 1, and Foundation 2, so that career learning can start from age 4 onwards, which is something I'm extremely passionate about. Now, so that's the kind of infinity and to infinity and beyond kind of element there. But I wanted to take an opportunity to look at some of the broader things that are contributing to the holes in the current system. And the first thing, you know, to be perfectly blunt, I think there are too many cooks in this careers broth. There are so many nationally funded initiatives with overlapping agendas that are reinventing the wheel, because they've got their own remits there, which overlap with other government office remits too. And I think the best kind of analogy really to relate this to is this incomplete jigsaw here. We've got the statutory guidance and DfE, we've got Gatsby, we've got Ofsted, we've got the Careers and Enterprise Company, we've got the Career Development Institute, our professional body for the careers sector, the Quality and Careers Standard, the National Quality Award for the sector, the UniConnect provision, which was previously known as NCOP, which is helping people to be able to aspire towards higher education, the National Careers Service, Job Centre Plus, National Citizen Service, and hundreds of little careers companies now, spoken about by the director of a small careers company. But I don't really know if the system could be more complex, to be perfectly frank. We've got all these all these people with their own agendas operating on a national level, kind of crossing over a lot of the time, really, which is providing this overlap. And partly, some of them are doing absolutely fantastic things, really. But if the resources were joined together better, I'm sure we could do so much more. And obviously, with that crossover on a national picture and that confusion on a national picture, it means that we're just going to experience the same at the local level. We've got to understand all the kind of policy levels and national players as well. But also, we might be part of a careers hub, or soon be part of a careers hub in our local area. We might be part of an opportunity area, or we should hopefully have access to enterprise coordinators that are doing sterling work in connecting education with employers and helping to support towards Gatsby. Similar with the outreach hubs from the National Collaborative Outreach Programs and UniConnect, should I say, sorry now, and the UniConnect advisors that can help to do some great work in raising aspirations and social mobility. There might be local networks with schools. You might be part of your own MAP network too, Multi-Academy Trust Network. There might be education business partnerships on your doorstep, and there might be at least one or two careers companies too that you're working with. And you've got to try and connect all these things together, find out what's going on locally, find out what's going on nationally, plan your careers program on the time that's been afforded to you to do so, which is a challenge, and it's quite frankly needs to be better coordinated. The third and final part of this particular part of the talk around the issues I've put here is mainly going to be around professionalism and priorities too. And I think what I mean by this then is that, okay, is careers guidance truly understood? And when I talk about careers guidance, I talk about the holistic sense of careers guidance, which is careers education, information, advice and guidance in kind of like old money. And is it truly understood? And is the impact of good careers guidance recognised? And to be honest, really, if I'm being frank, I'd say that the answer to that is probably no to both of those questions. And when I mean that, I mean about amongst young people, amongst parents, amongst schools, amongst teachers, amongst head teachers and governors and wider society. And I think the main reason for that is largely down to that elephant in the room that we spoke of earlier, which is about the lack of funding. The professional body is provided with some public funds, the CDI, but nowhere near enough to be able to tackle those first 2 points there about making sure that careers guidance is truly understood and that people know the economic impact it can have, as well as the impact to every young person. So that's an issue there, and only until things like the professional bodies can be funded well enough can we start to challenge those aspects there. But equally, with careers guidance not properly being recognised and understood, it means that obviously careers professionals aren't quite getting the levels of pay that they should be entitled to. We've lost no end of quality career professionals over the last 5 to 10 years, kind of thing, just because they've had to redeploy their skills because they're unable to make a living from their profession. And it's similar really about time for careers leadership. I've yet to meet a careers leader that said to me, do you know what, I've got too much time, I've got, bags of time here, I don't know what to do, kind of thing. So yeah, and also the level of funding from a school point of view too is very piecemeal then. So frankly, there's nowhere near enough of it. We talked a bit before about the Gatsby reports. There was approximately about 200 million that was supposed to be coming into that from PricewaterhouseCoopers to be able to fund that from the research. None of it, and and circa 40,000 at least each year into the schools and colleges individually. We don't get that kind of funding. So there's always going to be those kind of issues. We get 500s of thousands here and there with hoops to jump through to get there. But the final part too is that, you know, it's brilliant that we've got lots of interested bodies and parties in the profession that's influencing the careers agenda. But I think, to be honest, the time has come to start to stand up a little bit more and to say, well, actually, you know, should they be as influential as they are really in policy? And especially taking Gatsby for example there. I mean, Gatsby is an organization that's all about supporting plant science, neuroscience, education, Africa, public policy, and the arts, really. So, you know, and obviously it's led by Sir John Holman and his work, an ex-head teacher, an ex-science teacher. But from my experience, really, it's often the careers leader and the careers professional in the school that will help the head teacher and the science teacher to really understand what it is we should be doing in careers. And I'd like to see that being recognised at policy level, to be perfectly honest. Now, two slides here that look very different to the rest of the slide deck, and that's purely because I've shamelessly pinched these from David Andrews, but I've had permission from David to be able to pinch these. And we've been doing these conferences now for 10 to 15 years, and David has probably keynoted at the vast majority of them. And this is a slide he used at our last one, but also a slide that he's used at ISEGS recently too. But what this is a strategy for improving careers education. And I've turned it into a bit of a traffic-like system then to be able to review what progress I think has been made so far along the way since David introduced this 10-point plan to a good strategy for improving careers ed. So first of all, careers education in the curriculum used to be statutory. It's not anymore. There's been no developments there. It'd be brilliant if that was in the new statutory guidance. Amend the Gatsby benchmarks to include both discrete and cross-curricular delivery. We know cross-curricular is in there, that's Gatsby 4. The discrete means careers education, career learning on the timetable too. Now that doesn't have to be like an hour a week for careers. It doesn't have to be an hour a fortnight for careers. It can be in a carousel with PSHE and other aspects too. It's just got to be there, and it isn't at the moment within Gatsby and in the 8 benchmarks. There's some really good progress for these next 3 on greens. We've learned more about the Cdi framework. It's brilliant, it's there, it's live. So some huge progress there. We know about the impact of the hubs, and we know that hopefully there'll be more of them coming on board too. So that's a good plus. There's also been some sterling work around the career leader training. So lots, and I think close to 2,000 people have been trained in the career leader training, and that will be continued too. And people can get training up to level 6 and level 7, and a bursary perhaps too for the school to go alongside that, free of charge. That's phenomenal, and it's really changed the landscape and really changed the professionalism of careers. The rest, I'm afraid, are all ambers and reds. So I'll come back to this one in a moment around the initial teacher training and careers. I've put that as amber. I'll come back to that. I've put this in reds perhaps here about encouraging all schools to have careers as an item on their programme of CPD. So I think there's loads more progress that needs to be made there. And then the next one, number 8, has got all the colours of the traffic light system on. It's about promoting the quality and career standards as an external validation of achieving all 8 benchmarks. And it's amber because DFE strongly recommend it, so that's promoting it. Obviously, it's in green for the quality and career standard because they obviously promote the quality and career standard. But the Careers and Enterprise Company and Gatsby just purely don't promote the quality and career standard at the moment, and that's got to be addressed. 9 and 10 here, so it would be fantastic if there was some funding made available to schools to be able to work towards and achieve the quality and career standard. In the grand scheme of it, it would cost a fraction of what public spending there is at the moment to be able to satisfy that need. And also this requirement to publish on the website if you have it or if you're working towards it. And finally, in bold at the bottom here, is about getting the major players together to work closer together. And they are doing that, certainly, that can't be denied, and that, you know, working closely with DfE. But to be honest with you, I'd like to see those joint up together far more cohesively. Now, coming towards a close, you'll probably be pleased to know, but I want to start looking forward a little bit here and start to think about what glimpses have we got around what's to expect. Tristan mentioned about the skills white paper that came out in February, but in it, there were a number of kind of strong hints or even commitments that will be in the statutory guidance. The first of which is that the statutory guidance will come out. The current statutory guidance is from year 8 to year 13. The new one will go down to year 7, which is great. This Baker clause will be extended. So this is the access for education and training providers will be strengthened kind of thing. So we'll see what that looks like. There'll be more access to hubs, and there'll be more career leader training, both positive elements there. And hopefully we might finally get a user-friendly, learner-friendly National Careers Service website. But also there's kind of like aspirations there for Ofsted to take a thematic review on careers again, to look at greater alignment of the Careers and Enterprise Company and the National Careers Service, but then also hopefully to get more of careers in initial teacher training and overall CPD for teachers too. So we know we can expect those kind of things to come. And, you know, from the whispers that we hear, we know that it's expected any time soon. It's expected any time now. And there is talk overall of little major change, really. So mainly tweaks here and there, updating. But that may not be necessarily radical, therefore. But in my opinion, it's still particularly significant. And this is purely my opinion here, but obviously the Department for Education in the statutory guidance, you know, had this expectation that all schools should meet all 8 Gatsby benchmarks by the end of 2020. That was the main focus of the current statutory guidance. Now, you know, using it as a measure, the DfE has failed there. And I'd be surprised, to be perfectly honest, if there is another time limit that's applied. So I think what that will happen, therefore, is that time limit might actually, therefore, be removed. And in doing so, it moves the notion of the Gatsby benchmarks and meeting all 8 Gatsby benchmarks 100% away from a blueprint about you must do this to be, you know, to have a good careers program, and more as a guide then. So using that compass at the bottom, say, use this, it works. So use this as a way through, but also make sure you're giving enough attention to the learner, the individual learner, the learning outcomes, and the quality assurance, the external feedback and validation. So
5 minutes, John.
Lovely, thanks, Janet. I'm getting there, so we're doing good. So yeah, I mean, this is purely my own thoughts, really. So it might be, you know, it might be completely way off, but hopefully less of that blueprint and more of those guiding principles. Okay, so coming towards a close then. I just want to finish really by talking, first of all, about what you can be doing now to be improving your offer, and then finally, why bother? Okay, so first of all, these are things that, regardless of when the statutory duty is produced, if you focus on these as kind of like priorities, you can really make some strong headway. So first of all, asking yourself some of these questions. What are the aims and the curriculum objectives and learning outcomes for the career learning in our school, academy or college? So now we've got a really robust offer with the Cdi Framework that's just been updated, kind of thing. An excellent opportunity to be able to audit your provision, to see if those learning aims align quite closely with what you're hoping to do in your school, academy and college, and to maybe start to use those as a way to be able to set out that intent of your careers program. Then we're looking at the infrastructure too, as well as about, well, where is careers located in the curriculum? And quite frankly, is there enough time allocated to it to be able to make sure that we're giving learners the opportunity to develop their knowledge, skills and attitudes, to make sense of all those encounters, talks and experiences? Are we actually assessing career learning in the same way we do with other subject areas? If not, why not? Same with recording and reporting. And what about the capacity of who's teaching the curriculum to know that they've got the right kind of expertise and knowledge and support to do so? And ultimately, it's the question of why. Why bother then? And I mean, there are so many benefits to good quality careers guidance. The individual has to be the first starting point. And it's about that positivity, that motivation, social mobility, raising aspirations, broadening horizons, preparing better for transitions, and helping them to be effective career planners for life. It's not just one transition at the end of school, it's transitions throughout life that they need to be prepared for. But that has a knock-on effect to aims for the learning organisation too: attendance, attainments, transitions, destinations, but also the community, you know, the business and employer, the future supply and the demand of business. Linking that together closer can only be a good thing for businesses and the overall economy. But finally, now that we're in a time where COVID has really made a huge impact, and obviously the economy will suffer as a result of it, and young people will have their opportunities limited in a way by that, then, or limited more so. We've got more of a duty now more than ever to be able to make sure that learners are developing these knowledge, skills and attitudes. Qualifications alone these days, quite frankly, just aren't enough. The education system, therefore, where it's preparing people for the wider world of work, can be failing people these days. Employers need skills and work readiness. And I really do think that the time is now for careers and well-being to be the centre stage of the curriculum. Just want to finish by mentioning this Fulfilling Futures resource that you might be able to see on the right-hand side there. And this is a credit to the Greenwood Academy Trust that put a bid together to the Careers and Enterprise Company to put a holistic kind of like COVID catch-up documents then, which is filled full of activities, information, resources to be able to help people to be able to develop their decision making, learn more about the opportunities, find out more about how to transition, and obviously learn more about self first. So that is something that is being piloted now across all Greenwood Academy Trust schools, but it's something that we've made a commitment to. We wrote the materials and were commissioned by Greenwood Academy Trust to do so, but it's something that, because it's Careers and Enterprise Company funded, we want to make this available to all 15 to 18-year-olds. So if you would like a copy for your learners, for your parents, please do email admin@complete-careers.com or myself, and we'd be delighted to share that. We're all about empowering people to make successful transitions and achieve their career potential. That's what gets us out of bed in the mornings for Complete Careers, and everything we do is aligned to that motto. I really appreciate you taking your time to attend the conference today and to listen to my talk and everybody else. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I apologise a final time for those of you that experience problems. But back over to you, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Again, at this moment, I'm not going to take any direct questions. I'm trying to track the chat, and there's lots of things coming up which we may or may not be able to include, but we'll try and do our best. Our next speaker is very kindly fitting us in her break. We've had a bit of a crisis down at Haven High Academy. So I would like to swiftly introduce a local provider, Charlotte, and I think Charlotte is going to share her own screen, yes?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Charlotte, but at the moment I'm not seeing your screen.
No, that's fine. My laptop's just decided to have a bit of a 5-minute wobble. I'm just getting everything on now.
Just talk amongst
You know what these things are like.
Indeed, we do. We do. As I say, we've had 1 or 2 issues this morning.
Okay, so hopefully you can see me now. And then I'll just share my screen so you can see what we're about. There we go. Okay, so can you see my PowerPoint okay now?
We can see that you're sharing your screen, and yes, there we go. Well done, Charlotte.
Lovely.
Thank you very much appreciated.
Thank goodness for remote learning. I've actually had some practice in this now.
Yes.
Okay, so if I just minimise that so I can see. Okay, so thank you for introducing me, Janet. So as Janet said, I'm standing in for Elaine Dutton today. Elaine is our Director of Aspirations and our career lead, and unfortunately she's not available today. So I've kind of stepped in, and I will try and do what she would normally talk to you justice. But I have put her email address on the final slide. So if you do have any questions that directly relate to us at Haven High, or just want to know some information, then that will be available for you as well, just so you know. I'm from Haven High Academy, which is a co-ed 11 to 16 secondary school in Boston, Lincolnshire. We have approximately 20 to 250 students per year group, and that is increasing annually. We've seen a massive increase in our numbers on roll in the last few years. We've actually had over 500 applications for our New Year 7. Going into what we call the class of 26, because we call it the graduation year, as a part of raising their aspirations. We do have a very high percentage of EAL, so you can see it's 40%, just a bit over that. Lincolnshire itself is largely rural, so we have challenges of quite a lot of poverty in our area, but also we have just the general logistics of not being able to perhaps engage with local businesses or other establishments that you might find more readily available in larger towns or cities. So we have to be a bit creative with how we can actually expose our students to these opportunities without taking them halfway across the country, which obviously is not practical when you're trying to actually teach them as well. So Boston itself is quite a small town. It's fairly isolated in terms of geography and, as I said, opportunity as well. And the main bulk of the jobs in our area are agriculture, warehouses, factories, hospitality and manufacturing. So when we're trying to think about raising aspirations and get our students to think about things that the jobs that maybe do exist in our area but maybe not more commonly known, that is a big hurdle that we have to try and overcome. We do have 2 selective grammar schools in very, very close proximity to us, who take the obviously the top 30% of the highest achievers generally, and obviously with that we then have to think about that we have maybe some of the less able students as well, and we don't want to kind of single them out, and we don't want to leave them behind. We want to make sure that they feel as equally empowered to have a positive future as those people where academics comes more naturally to them. And as I've said, we do have low aspirations. Social mobility is a genuine problem, but that also applies to parents as well. So for us, a big challenge is parental engagement. And we actually have some colleagues of mine who are doing PhDs at the moment, and one of them is actually explicitly looking at engagement with parents, so how we can develop the parent-school relationship to then obviously further support the needs of our learners, because ultimately that's what it's about. So as an academy then, our vision is to, we aim to ensure that every student that comes through our doors, regardless of background or individual need, has the confidence and skills to become happy and successful citizens of the future. We want our students to leave equipped with the ability, drive, ambition and resilience to take their next steps, and everything we do has that in the back of our minds. So obviously the purpose of this session is to talk about kind of what we do as a bit of some sort of sharing best practice with you, but we can't talk about what we do now without thinking about where we've come from and where we started. And we didn't start with any form of front footing at all. Just a few years ago we had no clear careers framework. We had maybe the occasional tutor time task. Our social studies teachers worked with students, developing their CVs and things. We had the occasional external speaker for an assembly, maybe a workshop, but there was nothing that could be considered an actual framework. We had a significant lack of evidence showing the impact on our learners, because obviously, as we all know as professionals, there's no point doing something if you can't see the benefit of it and you can't assess the impact, because we don't want what we're doing to waste our time or the students' time. We want it to be purposeful. Ofsted even identified it as an area of improvement for us. So from an official standing, it's something we had to look at. And we also had no formal work experience programme. It was a case of, this is when work experience is, if you want to go, go. But there was no kind of formal positive push to do that. So they're the things that we needed to change. So because of that, our key priorities were the following. So we wanted compliance with the statutory guidance, so with the most recent careers frameworks, with the Gatsby benchmarks, and with what Ofsted now requires as well. We wanted to work towards meeting those Gatsby benchmarks in a formal capacity. We wanted to look at student voice versus our academy input. So what do our students want in consideration of what we as maybe adults think? I have a lot of students sort of come to me in my role as enterprise lead, and they say, like, Miss, why do we not learn about taxes? Why do we not learn about this? And it's a case of thinking, well, actually, yeah, why don't we learn about that? Why aren't we being more proactive in that? Why aren't we listening to what they want and actually getting that in? Because ultimately, the more engaged our students are thinking that we're preparing them for the real world, the more engaged they're going to be when actually wanting to do the academia side as well. So it's very much a parallel for the two, in my personal opinion. And then we wanted to triangulate our policy, our practice, and our performance. So what were we sort of formally and legally required to do? What were we doing on a day-to-day basis? And what was the impact of that for our students and our school as a whole? But I know Elaine and I are very much on the same page, as I think I'm sure yourselves are as well, but we're in it for the students. It's not just the school. The school is the kind of mechanism that gets everything going, but everything we do is for the students and the students alone. So how have we implemented them? So we have three distinct areas of focus at Haven. We have the careers focus, which is headed up by Elaine. We have the enterprise focus, which is headed up by myself. And we have a community focus, which is headed up by our colleague Emma. And all three of us work in tandem with one another to develop events and develop programs so that we can try and sort of tackle as many of the things going on with our students as possible. We have a structured program for tutor time, so it's based on the Cdi Framework, which obviously will be updated to reflect the most recent changes. We have embedded sort of careers and enterprise and those thoughts throughout the curriculum. Our teachers will signpost career options which link to their subjects, which can be something from having an actual careers day where we look at something in more depth, to quite simply, I mean, I teach business studies, so it could be a case of when we're looking at finance, this is something that if you decide that you want to become an accountant, this is the kind of thing that you could look to be doing. Or if we're looking at marketing. So those of you with a really creative side, you might want to consider careers here. And it can be a 10-second conversation, but if that sparks interest with those students and maybe gives them something that they hadn't perhaps considered before, then that's a 10-second comment worthwhile. We also have drop-down days, which I know a lot of schools do, to focus on specific industries or skills or progression routes. So sometimes we'll have maybe days that focus on apprenticeships. We'll have days that focus on the armed forces. We have a lot of our teachers who are ex-forces themselves, so we can draw on all of that experience, those expertise. We have a lot of teaching staff and a lot of members of staff that have come from industry backgrounds as well. So we like to tap into that and go and sort of think about where they come from. Do they have contacts with perhaps some larger companies that we wouldn't necessarily have a contact with as a standard school? But because we know that there's experience elsewhere, how can we get that in and how can we make that beneficial for our students? We have an annual event called Impact Fest, which is my personal highlight of the year, but I'll give you a bit more on that in just a second. We annually participate in Careers Week, Apprenticeship Week, Enterprise Week, and any of the other sort of aspirational weeks that we can really. Sometimes we have them as sort of more drop-down weeks where we have a lot of off-timetable time to focus on things explicitly. Other times it's a case of embedding certain skills or certain concepts into normal lessons and form times. And we're dictated by, in obviously most recent years, COVID, what can we do, what can't we do, but also in case of being sensitive of maybe upcoming exams and pressures on staff. So we don't want to make everything sort of all go all the time. Sometimes it's just a simple case of saying, at the beginning of your lesson, can you just have a chat about this? and then most of our teachers are usually on board with that, and they give us really positive feedback about those conversations. We now have a dedicated and comprehensive work experience programme. So we have all of our year 10 students will go out to work experience. In fact, that's in the planning stages at the moment. We're hoping with restrictions looking to ease in the coming weeks that we can send our students out. Obviously COVID secure, but we're looking to get those out and get them experienced in some work experience. All of our work experience students will be visited by a member of staff, and we go through obviously a checklist on how they're performing, how they're finding it. And we encourage them to do work experience, even if they're going somewhere they don't like or don't want to go. That in itself we promote as a valuable experience, because if nothing else, it rules something out that they don't want to go down. So if they go to a retail environment and it's just not for them, then they have had that experience it themselves, rather than being told that maybe that's not the right route for them, and then they can guide their own progression in a different way. We have a specific area of the school called Future Zone, which also encompasses our careers library, which has got information on the local colleges, apprenticeships, universities even, so that people, so students can go in and say, well, I kind of think I want to be, I think I want to be a marketing executive, for example, and then they can have a look at maybe what a university marketing degree will require of them, and they can kind of work backwards. And likewise, it's a place where if they have no idea what they want to do, they can go and just start flicking through things and seeing if anything stands out to them. And Elaine and Emma are based down there, so they will be able to on hand for conversations or just questions. Also, as part of that, we have like a triage approach to careers interviews. So every student in the school at some point towards their sort of end of Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 time will have a one-to-one careers interview with either Elaine or Emma. It's initially a quick chat to assess their needs, and if a student comes and says, oh yes, I know what I want to do, I want to go to college, do X, Y and Z with a focus on being here, it's like, brilliant, that's great, if you've got any problems, come back. If we have a student perhaps that either has no idea what they want to do and maybe needs to have a bit more of a formal conversation, or if perhaps we identify low aspirations, maybe because they've got low self-confidence, maybe anxiety, and SEND requirement, EAL is a big impact, because all of those things tend to come with a thing of, well, I can't do that because I'm not going to be any good at that because. So that's when Emma will take or Elaine will take a more detailed approach with it and actually give them a further interview to really kind of home out what's the concern, what are the problems, can we give you any support, or just maybe to highlight something that they might not have thought of before that really does tailor to the skills they already have. We've also introduced a concept called Breakfast with the Business, which obviously with COVID we've had to temporarily postpone, but we'll be looking to reinitiate soon. And what that is we have a selection of students that we identify from the interviews or through kind of teacher suggestions or kind of a bit of a student voice survey, and we invite local businesses in, and we identify students that may benefit from an engagement with that business, just to sort of congregate in sort of a sports hall or a larger classroom depending on numbers. And we literally, it's exactly what it says on the tin. We provide some pastries, some fruit and some coffee and some juice and stuff. And it's just an opportunity for our students to talk with people in the real world in industries that they may have an interest in. And likewise, it's a chance for local businesses to actually engage with our students and perhaps see some of their employees of the future. And we've had some really positive feedback from the initial couple of those that we've done. So we're looking to develop that even more. So as I said, we looked at Impact Fest. It's our annual event. Again, everything comes with a COVID condition at the moment, but it's already in plans for next academic year. And it's a whole school drop-down day. The last one we did, we had over 70 local businesses, community groups and charities who attended. Each one provided information on what they did, sort of why they were set up, the opportunities that they offer, and provided on the whole sort of some kind of activity. So we managed to get the YMCA provided a rock climbing wall, so we could do have sort of test some skills and things as well. We have a parkour area. We had some local banks coming in to look at sort of fraud and security. We had some local retail businesses that came in and ran some sort of competitions with them. We had some independent businesses, so we had an independent florist come in and sort of show them what they do. So we had things from all different all walks of life, all different industries, backgrounds, and everything, so that students could really see like the complete plethora of stuff that is available in their small area, because Boston as itself gets a pretty bad rep. So for us, it's really important to make them go, okay, so Boston does have its challenges, but look at all of this. Look at how amazing X, Y, and Z is, and look what you could do if you focus on this. Part of that day was also to give students a passport. So they all had a sort of A4 booklet that had questions relating to every exhibitor in there. So it could be something like, in what year did this business start? Or what are the 4 main focuses of this charity? Or how much money did this charity raise last year? Things like that, just to try and get our students actively talking to these businesses, because otherwise, particularly those with lower confidence, will just think, oh, I can't talk to them, I don't want to. This gave them an in. It gave them an opportunity to just kind of ask the question that was in front of them. And then for quite a lot of our students, that then snowballed into a conversation of, okay, so why do you work there then? Or our employers or our exhibitors actually then ask them questions. So do you have an interest in this, or things like that? So it started those conversations that otherwise would never have happened. To help organise the event, we organised it into specific zones. So we had a STEM zone, a sports zone, a community zone, an enterprise zone, and then a careers education zone. And all students rotated around it 1 hour in each one. So all students got to experience everything within that day. It also supported our transition week. It helped our students to understand what opportunities are available for them in their local town. And it also supports our Raising Aspirations Academy focus. So as I said, our starting point wasn't that brilliant. So this is our assessment of the Gatsby benchmarks. And you can see that in September 2018, we had nothing really to go on. We had everything to improve. And we were kind of in a bit of a tricky point of where do we go now? How can we actually address this? And you can see after the assessment in February 2019, those numbers have gone up quite significantly. And now I'm very pleased to say that we've actually now achieved all the benchmarks. All of our benchmarks are now 100%, and we achieved that in December 2019. We're due for recertification soon, but as it stands at the moment, we were awarded the career mark, which is brilliant for us and is a testament to the staff's hard work here. We're now continuously exploring ways to improve our careers and education programme and the opportunities that we can actually offer our students, whether that's engaging with external agencies, local businesses, the local community, or whether it's looking at maybe more national concepts. I mean, the one positive thing about COVID is that a lot of things are virtual now. So perhaps sort of talks and opportunities that we couldn't introduce our students to because they were in another part of the country or even another part of the world, we can now engage with those. So we're looking to really work with those opportunities to develop what our students can have. But ultimately, the main purpose is that we want to actually make sure that all of our programs are directly tailored to the needs of the students, and that's something we actively focus on a day-to-day basis. And we also now have an embedded work experience program, as I said previously. So all of that's great, but how do we actually measure it? So first of all, we do a triangulation analysis of our student voice, our staff voice, and our parent voice. So looking at what our students want, looking at what our staff value is important, what they think that they can include within their lessons, and also maybe what needs to be a more external support, and our parent voice. So what do our parents want for our children, for our students? How are they going to prepare to get involved? Can they get involved? And things like that. We've also got quite a few parents who enjoyed getting a bit more actively involved, and we've had parents come in and talk to students about maybe their career choices and how they got to there. So we've got a few people, for example, who are consultants at the local hospital. They come in and talk about how it's actually how their work is on a day-to-day basis. We have other people come in who maybe own their own family farming business for however many generations. And so it's not about just going, these are the jobs that are going to get you the most money, because that's ultimately not what all of our students want, and that's not the big picture. What we actually want is for our students to see, this is the range of opportunities to you. Pick the one that works best for you. Don't pick the one that your friend's doing. Don't pick the one that's guaranteed to get you X, Y, and Z. Pick the one that's best for you. And that's one of the main priorities that we have. We also do an evaluation of all our events and workshops. So that could be a quick Microsoft Office Forms quiz sort of for feedback. It could be asking them to fill in a quick slip at the end. It could be just having a bit of a Q&A, but whatever it is, there's some evaluation of the events and workshops that we have. We also look at instant measurement using formative assessment. So, you know, raise your hand if you've learned something new, quick Q&A, quick fire, that kind of thing, just so that in some way, shape or form, we know whether the event was a success and to what extent that was a success. We also have a very responsive approach. I mean, as professionals, you can tend to work out if an event is going to plan. I mean, me, myself, there's been many sort of times that I've been running a lesson, for example, and I've kind of felt tumbleweed. And I think, okay, we need to change the approach here. And then next time it goes much better. And it's the same way that we approach our careers and enterprise opportunities, to actually respond to what works well and what we need to do in the future. And we also look at our destinations data. So as you can see here, we've got 2015 all the way up to 2020. And you can see how our numbers for college have pretty much stayed the same. But the main thing for us is that over the last sort of 3-4 years, our sixth form attendance has increased. And that's in line with the fact that a lot of our students now feel like they're deserving of going to a sixth form. Previously, it's been a case of, well, what do you expect? I'm from Haven. And we worked really hard to try and change that aspiration and change that impact. So now, last year, we had 20% of our students go to the local sixth form. And that's a testament to obviously the hard work and of the students and how they actually feel like themselves that they can progress. Another statistic as well that we're quite proud of is the no NEET students. For the last 3 years, we have had no students that have been identified to us as NEET. And that's obviously a statistic we're hoping to continue with. And the last one that is really pleasing is the course level at the bottom row there. You can see that the amount of students going on to level 1 courses has decreased by 14%. Our level 2 courses have also decreased in line with our actual attainment progress 8 data improving. So the GCSE grades of our students has drastically increased. And so our level 3 courses is nearly, last year was nearly 50%. And obviously we've got 22% that we hadn't, because of COVID, been able to contact or hadn't responded. So hopefully that those numbers will be an increase as well. So what are our next steps then? So we've got continuous development of our existing programme, looking at what we're already doing, what we did well, what can we improve. We're looking to do targeted workshops for specific jobs. So looking at how we can get people from the local community in for a specific job role, and then based on career interviews and information, we can then target based on that. We want further engagement with the local community and businesses, obviously post-COVID when things are back to normal again. We're going to do enterprise activities throughout year groups. So at the moment, we do have some in all year groups, but as it usually is, it's more focused on the year 9 upwards. So we want to do some more active enterprise activities and in year 7 and 8 as well. We're looking to roll out a more comprehensive volunteer programme so our students can develop those skills as well. Student mentoring is something that we are hoping to develop, and so get our older students mentoring our younger students. Elaine and I are looking at the careers and enterprise ambassadors. So every single form group will have a careers and enterprise ambassador who will be able to lead on careers related activities, support us with the likes of Impact Fest and things like that, which will mean that we can communicate with our students better, but it also gives those particular students the opportunities for leadership that they may not have had otherwise. I mentioned breakfast with a business. We're also looking to do more themed breakfast with the businesses later on to target specific students and industries. So for example, we may invite the local hotels and cafes and entertainment businesses in. So any of our students that wanted to go into the hospitality, leisure and entertainment industries can then have a direct conversation with those people in those jobs, find out how those people got to those jobs and where they're going to go from there. We're also looking to hold a Meet the Candidate event for local apprenticeship providers, whereby any local businesses looking for apprenticeships can actually come in for a day. Our students who are perhaps interested in those apprenticeships can create an application for it. The apprenticeship providers can then shortlist, and then they can actually interview for their position amongst our students there and then, so that our students can experience interview skills and application skills a bit more but also those local apprenticeship providers can actually directly meet the people that are genuinely interested in working for them. We also want to roll out a primary school programme. So as part, because we're a multi-academy trust, we're actually the only secondary school in our trust. All the other sort of 10, 11 schools are primary schools. So we want to start developing this a lot more and going into primary schools, and not with a focus on careers. We don't want them to start, growing up too soon. It's about finding out their interests, finding out their likes, their dislikes. What are your skills? What do you really want to improve on? And so they come to us in year 7 with a mindset of, this is what I really enjoy, this is what I want to do or improve on, this is what I don't really like, and this is perhaps what I want to work on. So that when we do these events with them and we do a more targeted careers framework with them, it has a bigger impact, because they know themselves a bit more. And then we also want to build an ethos where skills are as naturally embedded as our academic and careers framework. So we're really good, obviously, at the teaching and learning side. We're really good at getting the careers stuff in there, but we're still working on is developing those skills. So, for example, improving presentation skills within lessons, improving verbal communication, not getting students to just say sort of like 1 or 2 word answers, actually getting them to extend it and explain it. So that when they actually get to the real world and perhaps they're having to do a presentation like this, hopefully they don't, don't get too choked up, don't get too panicked or fall over the words. So that's everything from me. I don't know how long I've taken because I've deliberately turned off any distractions. But if you do have any questions or anything, Elaine is the woman to ask. If it's anything enterprise related, she will then pass it on to me and I'll happily respond to you. But if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. You've gone over a little what we were expecting, but we will compensate for that. I don't have to talk so much at the end of the conference. I think that was absolutely brilliant. And again, it's reminded me how important it is for non-academic students to be encouraged to think about their future. Okay, Lucy's been really on the ball. We've just put a slide up now, hopefully, that says you've got another 10-minute break. Please come back at 5 to 12. George, who is up next from Eton, please doesn't mean you've got to be any shorter, George. Please say what you've got to say when you come back. I will be the one who, if necessary, says less, and that's fine by all of you, I'm sure. Many of you know I can talk for England if I want to, but I can also try and be short and to the point. So, coffee break, back in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. We are back to hear this time from another colleague. At CareerMark, we're very proud, really, which is part of our brand, that we work with such a diverse range of schools and colleges and special schools. I have noticed in the chat that some of the colleges feels they're sometimes ignored. I know that special schools and others feel similarly. However, we like to think we include everybody, and you heard from Elaine, Elaine's colleague Charlotte, who works in a school which is, from my background, would really be probably called a secondary modern, if any of you are old enough to remember that, because there's 2 grammar schools. Now we're going to a school which probably has some of the highest fees in the country. However, also, whatever else we might think and know about them, has an absolutely stunningly good careers programme, just like Haven High, but obviously for a different cohort. So welcome, George. I'll shut up and you have the floor.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janet. I'm not quite sure how to respond to that, but it's brilliant to follow on from that great story from Charlotte and Haven High, and also the talks from John and from Tristram earlier, with all that great information. But following all of that, I feel that to quote another Toy Story quote, "This isn't flying, this is falling with style." That's more or less going to describe my talk today. But I hope it gives you a flavour of what we do. And I'm just trying to get my slides to move, which would be great if they did. I don't know why they're not. No, there we go. So they are moving there. So we are a career education department. I don't like to be called a careers department. We're not about pigeonholing people. We're about getting people to think about career education. Our strapline is weaving employability through the curriculum, and we do that as best we can, as we all do, I think. Anytime I talk to my students in assemblies or whatever, I will define what I mean by employability. And as you can see there, what I like about this definition of employability is it talks about skills, knowledge, understanding, and attributes that make a person more likely to choose, secure, and develop careers in which they can be satisfied, successful, and the really important bit, happy. And we're into the whole business of people having fulfilling careers, and understanding what it means to have a fulfilling career. This time last year, or maybe back in February last year, I would be talking to assemblies and saying the reason that you need to concentrate on employability is because the century that we're going into has got all sorts of drivers, which is going to make it imperative that you are employable, because we don't quite know what's out there. And if you look at a report like this from PwC, which came out about a couple of years ago, here are 5 drivers which I would say to the boys, these are things you really need to think about. You need to think about AI. You need to think about the fact that the population is getting older. There is urbanization. There are huge ecological problems and climate problems that we're going to face, and issues in shifting global economic power from the west to the east. But of course, what I didn't know, and what probably none of us knew, is that COVID was going to come along, just to emphasize the fact that employability is going to be key in the period going forward. And of course, now we have reports like this one from McKinsey, the future of work after COVID-19. COVID has made us all think about where we work, how we work, and even why we work. It is changing the workplace, and we don't quite know how. So that's why employability is important. And that's, I think, the message that I would give to my students. My late colleague, Alison Fair, produced this pyramid, which illustrates the sort of process and the principles that we work to. And I think mostly today I'm going to talk about the bottom 2 levels of self-analysis. If you don't understand yourself, it's very hard to, in a sense, match yourself to a career. But it's also about giving students the opportunity to do the right research and the right sort of information gathering and getting the right experience. This career pyramid is something I have on my wall behind me. You probably can't see it, but it's there somewhere. And it's something we tend to try to live to and live with. When I talk to boys in our year 9, we have boys for 5 years in the school, and we have 1,300 boys altogether. I say to them, look, you're going to be here for 1,000 days, essentially. What are you going to do with your 1,000 days? How are you going to use that, those opportunities that you have within the school to develop your employability? One of my favorite quotes, which I always put in front of them, is the future depends on what you do today. So don't put it off. You know, take opportunities as they come, make the most of them. This is a sort of timeline. It's not our career plan, but it certainly morphed into our career plan of the opportunities that boys can opt into. And a lot of what we do is opt in, giving opportunities for boys to opt in. I just need to sort of tell you a little bit about the lines are our years. So F and E block are year 9 and 10. D block, which is the orange line, is year 11, and you can guess the rest. Those are, you know, some of the opportunities that we're hoping that our students are going to tap into. And we make sure that not just the students, but the staff and their parents also know that these opportunities exist, because I think parents can sometimes be a great driver in getting boys to appreciate that they need to act. Sorry for the long quote, but I really like this quote, and I hope you're reading it while I'm talking and not be too distracting. Let me just stop for a second and let you read it. So what this quote is really saying is that, you know, in schools, we're all about encouraging students to, you know, have good research skills, but do they understand how important it is to look up the relevant information on companies that they might be interested, the careers, the professions that they might be interested in, and so on. So I think this is really important. And a lot of what we offer is about platforms which allow people to do really effective research. We're big fans of the Moresby psychometric test, and all of our students take the Moresby test in year 11. They do a sort of precursor to that in year 9. And we use the Moresby platform, and this is the landing page for Moresby, to host our career plan. And I'm not sure Janet's seen this since her visit. But this is our career plan, and these are the options that are available to years 9 through 11. The boys are able to access those activities as and when they need to. And they can also log their activity and reflect on their activity on the platform. And that's a good way for us to manage and to some extent assess what is going on. And how effective we're being. And so that's, in a sense, a blow up of our year 9 career plan and what's available. As Charlotte was saying at Haven High, we carry out surveys and questionnaires and so on in order to assess where students are and also where they got to and how much impact we're having. Because without the data, it's really difficult to make sense of whether you're doing anything at all, really. We particularly like this book by Jonathan Black. It came out under another name 3 years ago. But Jonathan Black's the director of the University Career Service at Oxford. He did a survey in, I think it was 2013, so 4 years before the book was published, of 15,000 Oxford graduates, and showed that, and I find this surprising, but maybe you won't, but after 10 years in the workplace, Oxford graduates had worked for an average of 3 employers, and sometimes obviously far more than that, and they frequently change sector too. It seems to me that what this says is that however able you are, career is a journey, and people tend to make transitions through that journey, and we need to give them the skills to make those transitions effectively. Hopefully maybe not so many transitions by choosing the right career in the first place, but at least I think it's important to understand that people do make career transitions, and in a world of portfolio careers and in a world post-COVID, then that might be even more important than it is. So I find this a remarkable slide. You may not, but I share it with you anyway. In the spirit of John Ambrose and Toy Story, the other quote that occurred to me would apply to what we do is this: the thing that makes Woody special is that he'll never give up on you. And there is a sense in which we never give up on our students once they've left the school. So we do try to support them, particularly up to age 30. So we do get students coming back asking for advice and asking for guidance. But you know, we have alumni who are older than that who come back, and we have conversations with if we can. You know, life is busy. We don't always have a huge amount of time to do that, but we as a principle, I think, we don't give up on our students, and we are here to help. We run a number of, as I'm sure many schools, most schools do, society meetings which are career related, which our students can access. This is an example of one earlier this year: careers in computer aided engineering, from a very local company, and was very, very useful. We run a whole load of workshops and networking events on using LinkedIn, which is a passion of mine. And we ran a trader workshop, which had a really good attendance of students. And we open up most of these workshops and networking events to our local partner schools as well. So we think it's great to have that sort of mixture in there. But networking events are just an opportunity, obviously, to meet a whole, you know, maybe a dozen entrepreneurs or a dozen doctors or whatever, and talk to them. And we run career seminars like the computer aided engineering poster I showed you earlier. And here is just a range of some that we've run this year. We have about one of these a week as a rule, sometimes even 2 a week. So we really do try and give a huge opportunity. And as I say, these are open to local schools as well. We take the boys out on business insight days to local companies. We're lucky that we are not just across the river from Windsor, but very near Slough. And there are some great sort of tech companies around that we can visit, like Sage and Poly and Bupa. Those business insight days take 15, 20 boys or so, and just immerse themselves in the business for a day. And that is a very effective way. And it occurs to me at the moment, when work experience is almost impossible, unless it's virtual, that business insight days are a very effective way of the next best thing to work experience. We use other platforms for research, as I sort of indicated earlier, and we're big fans of Unifrog, and particularly the careers library in Unifrog, which we find very helpful, and so on. We're also big fans of Saku, which is a platform I don't know if you've come across, but in a very interesting way and very quickly, you can generate a subject cloud for your university choices and a career cloud. And what's nice about it is it throws up, as you can see, a word cloud with some big words, but also some small words. And if you click on the big words or the small words, it takes you off to a whole load of information, which is a really fun way to do it. And for those of you who've never come across Saku before, I do recommend it. But also just to point out that Saku is UCAS backwards. We're also interested in, as I said, we're interested in psychometric profiling as a way of encouraging students to think about who they are and what their aptitudes and skills are. But we're also interested in strengths profiling, which is something that we started last year. And we are accredited strengths coaches. we believe that actually getting, in this case, our year 12s to take a strengths profile, again, just encourages them to think about what are their strengths. We're so used to thinking about weaknesses in schools and trying to deal with weaknesses, that actually to celebrate strengths and to think about what it means to be, a strength being something not just that you're good at, but something that will get you out of bed in the morning. Then that, I think, is really important. So strengths is another platform that we use. And the other platform that we use is EtonX, which is a platform clearly that Eton College has got something to do with. Not only is that being used, I think, in schools across the country, but we use it for our CV writing training and for our interview skills training as well. So that's another platform that we use. So there are lots of platforms there, and we do make use of them as we can. In our case, 99.9% of our students go off to universities, and a very narrow range of universities. But for us, it's important to make sure that they've thought of alternative pathways that they can access, such as the ones which are on here. We also have an intranet which has a whole load of information on it, and this is what the intranet, our intranet page looks like, so people can drop into career education and get advice on writing CVs, what the advantage of doing a MOOC is, and so on and so forth. So we're working on developing this all the time. And we have a newsletter which is virtual these days. These are mostly articles written by boys about what they've done in their work experience or whatever. Again, these go out, again, goes to parents, goes to staff, and keeps everybody in the loop so that everybody knows what's going on and what the opportunities are. We are a team. It's not just me, and this is my colleague, Kathy McKenna, and this is us standing proudly, I can't remember when this was, but not that long ago, qualifying with a diploma in career management at the University of Canterbury Christchurch. And we are great believers in CareerMark and the rigor that involves in submitting to that, and we do value the quality and career standard and the way it makes us think about what we do and how we do it. So that is me and my contact details, and I have no idea whether I've talked for too long or too short, but hopefully it's left some time for questions. And so my contact details are there if you'd like to get in touch with me.
Sorry.
That's me. I'm finished. I'm done. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, George. You've timed that almost perfectly with the lag we had. So thank you for that. SACU has obviously been flagged up, and somebody shared on the chat how brilliant it is and how they can do it. So that's also interesting. Now, in theory, we have a sort of question panel now. I'm going to ask George to stay visible, Tristan and John, if possible, to turn themselves on. We have some other people who may be party to more information than we are, I note. But so if anybody wants to help try and answer some of these questions, they are very welcome to do so. I am going to keep this to about 30 minutes max. We'll see how it goes. But I did pick up some questions, and I'd like to ask about what the three panelists think perhaps about how schools can be helped to keep their destination information tracking, which is a requirement of Gatsby. Any comments about that? That's my first question from chat. John, should I start with you?
Thanks, Janet, for that. I think the issue is about inconsistency across the country, really, because there are some local authorities. I've seen Jackie Phipps is involved in the conference here, and her local authority and bordering local authorities are doing some sterling work there to really enable schools and work with schools and colleges to be able to help them present the data back so that they can make sense of it and use it in a way in which they can support learners and track where they're going and see who needs the most help. The issue is that, you know, it's completely different in every other local authority. So, and it's about GDPR, it's about understanding of legislation, but just as we've still got some connection services in parts of the country, you know, and we don't, in the vast majority of the country, we've got some local authorities and local enterprise partnerships that do a sterling job on this issue, and some that just don't touch it at all, kind of thing, and leave schools and colleges very much in the dark. So, you know, other than, you know, investing the time into, you know, tracking manually or look at some of the software kind of thing, it has to be a lobbying point of view from my perspective to the local authority. Strength in numbers with a careers hub and a local careers hub or a local group of schools might help you to get on and go further on that.
Okay, thank you, John. Tristan, anything to say about that one?
Yeah, I mean, mainly that I agree with that. I think one of the things that can be difficult for schools is that everybody wants to do a really good job and to do the best that they can. But sometimes there are things which are not within your control, and not meeting all of the Gatsby benchmarks is not a failing, an individual failing. In some cases, you know, there are things which either you haven't got the resources to do, or in this case, in which the systems don't exist in order to support it. And I think, as John says, you know, some of that has got to be about us lobbying to government and saying, yeah, we agree the idea of tracking pupils for 3 years after they leave is a good, you know, it's a good idea. It's helpful. It gives us an evaluation measure. It also gives us opportunities, if we do it right, to bring back those pupils to learn from their destinations and so on. That's all a good idea. But at the moment, the systems don't exist to do it. I mean, having said that, I think there are some things that are good to do. So one is, even if it doesn't, you know, well, I suppose I think there's probably three main things that I'd stress. One is build a good relationship with your local authority so that you've got good data sharing in place. The second thing is there is value from doing a survey. Now, a survey won't give you a complete picture of everything that every pupil has done, but if you did a survey every few years to find out how people are getting on, it would give you interesting data that you could use. And the third thing is building an alumni network. And you know, one of the things we found in the Gatsby work was that independent schools really good at that. State schools often not so good at that. But there's just a stronger rationale for state schools to create alumni networks. So all of those things are useful. I don't think they meet in full the kind of Gatsby benchmark requirements around this, and that's why I think we need to be pushing a bit more with local authorities and with government generally.
Brilliant, thank you, Tristan. George, do you want to add anything? I'm sorry, I won't make you go last each time.
That's okay, I don't mind. I think from my point of view, I mean, we talked about staying in touch with our alumni, our ex-students, and it's a two-way street. If we stay in touch with them, then they will stay in touch with us. So, and they will very often, we find the best ambassadors for careers are, you know, young leavers who come back age 24, 25 and talk about what it's really like in the workplace. You know, and you know, it can be too easy to bring in older folk, you know, my age, talking about their wonderful career in industry or whatever and how they managed to be CEO. But actually, that's not really the reality. The reality is what it's like for, you know, 20 odd year olds in the workplace. So keeping in touch with them is really important, and it is a two-way street, and we benefit from that. In our case, LinkedIn is a really powerful way of keeping in touch, and LinkedIn is an amazing. It's not just a sort of personal branding, you know, electronic CV. It's a great way of searching. It's a fantastic search engine. So in our case, actually, LinkedIn is a reasonably effective way of looking at, you know, where our old boys have gone to and what it is that they're doing, you know, which universities they went to, you know, and you can, you know, segment that, you know, and so it's a really powerful tool that, you know, I'm only beginning to understand how powerful it is. So.
Excellent, thank you. That was 3 very good answers, I would say. Well done, guys. Next question I'm going to throw at you is this one about the professional roles. And I don't think, well, in my mind, there's not a simple answer. And again, it goes back. I was a teacher I was a teacher until 2001 when I joined what was the Connections Service as a curriculum advisor. If people remember those, or they may not have had them, the Connection Service had a duty to support career education because at the time it was statutory. I've therefore always considered myself a career education professional. I didn't take any guidance training. Those of you who know me well or even know me vaguely know I'm far too opinionated and have a tendency to be far too judgmental to make a good guidance professional. I remember as a young woman telling people they couldn't or shouldn't do things because that was me. I'm a little better than I used to be. So we have a careers workforce which maybe has some careers educators, although it's not a title often used. We have a lot of career guidance professionals, if that's a term I'm allowed to use, the ones who are very skilled in the one-to-one work, which again, as an ex-teacher, I don't think teachers always understand the level of training and knowledge one-to-one guidance professionals have. We've now got another group, perhaps, who are being trained up as careers leaders, but again, some of them are trying to do 2 jobs, 1 job, 3 jobs, half a job, you know, with other people. I know, Tristan, you briefly mentioned about the status, and I know the CDI is trying to work on the status of the profession and what people should be paid for it and all that sort of thing. I was also interested, George, that you talked about yours is a career education department, which I thought was interesting. So, you know, just comments around that. We had 1 or 2 people saying, is it a good idea if one person does the guidance and the leadership in school? Is it a bad idea? Who should be doing it? And I think, you know, comments on that whole business of who understands who does what in careers might be interesting. Can I start with you this time, George? Is that okay? Your comments on that one? As an ex-teacher like me.
Yeah, well, I'm still a current teacher, so I teach and do this job as well. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, it is a sort of it's a mixture, isn't it, of you know what we deliver. You know, we're very lucky. We have 2 level 7 qualified, you know, career guidance professionals who can deliver. We have, you know, all our boys do Moresby in year 11, and they meet an independent careers advisor from Moresby, and they have that benefit there. And then the trick in our case is to get my colleagues, tutors and housemasters, to engage with that message and talk to the boys at particular transition points about what they want to do. So it sort of works from our point of view, but it's very difficult, I think, you know, as a careers department, even with the resources we have to, you know, get colleagues always, you know, they're busy people, you know, and schools are incredibly busy people, busy environments, and therefore it's very hard for everybody to engage in the way that you would like them to, and it's ensuring the quality of what's going on in school. You know, it's always a very sort of heterogeneous delivery. I mean, I honestly can't see any way around it in that case. But that's our personal case, if you like. So.
Absolutely. Tristan, do you want to come in next on that one?
Yeah. So a few years ago, there was a European project. Remember those? Where a number of well, in fact, all over Europe, people who are involved in the training of careers professionals came together, and they agreed what's called the NICE framework. So and it's essentially what should careers professionals be trained in, and it covers lots of the things that we've been talking about. So it covers counselling, career guidance, as we call it in the UK, but in other countries we call career counselling. It covers careers education, information provision, and career assessments. It also covers management and intervention into systems, so things like advocacy and so on. Now, they're all different jobs, and it's definitely possible to break those jobs up. And I think where we are now, if you've got a good teacher or a good another member of staff, and you want to put them into place, and really the core things you're looking for them to do are to be able to understand careers education and to lead a team broadly, then training people as a careers leader is great. And that's been a huge step forward for us. And I think we absolutely need that in schools. I think if we were looking at the training that we give for people who are careers professionals, then we should make sure that that training encompasses all of the different areas that are in this nice framework that I talked about. So, and where I've had influence over that, so for example, in the program in Derby, we train people and when they come out as excellent career guidance, one-to-one practitioners, but they're also trained with the idea that they might be running a program in a school or potentially going on to lead a higher education careers service or whatever, work in any different context. And I think when we train people, really we should train the kind of modern careers professional needs to have a number of different strings to their bow, and they shouldn't just be counselling professionals. But, in the situation we're in now, there's a lot of work to do, and we find people who can do the different parts of the work, and I think that's fine. So if you have a careers leader in a school and they're an ex-teacher or coming from some other background, they aren't necessarily competent to deliver the career guidance on their own, so they need to bring in people who are competent to do that. I think that's absolutely right, and we divide those roles up. As I say, in the long run, I would like to see the growth of a careers workforce that was, I think, more professional and able to take on more of these roles, really.
Thank you, Tristan. That's very interesting, because I'm a bit of an old bat, as I always say when I talk to the young people, a bit of a deaf old bat even, So, as I say, that might have put me off as a younger woman at going into careers if I knew I had to do one-to-one guidance, because I know it's not my skill set, but it's a very interesting thought, and it might be where the profession could go, because it's a good idea. I certainly think about that. John, what do you want to contribute there?
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing direction that the direction with the career development qualification these days is more holistic, and then obviously the way in which you can get qualified now is more varied too, with the career development apprenticeship at level 6 too. So these are all really encouraging signs, and I think obviously the career leader training through the Careers and Enterprise Company is absolutely astonishing in what that's managed to achieve, to be able to get what I believe is close to 2,000 career leaders trained in this country, and that's been prioritised through DFE. So that's phenomenal, and that's only going to improve. But the issue is, though, we're looking at the professionalism, for me, certainly anyway, but I mean, it's more about understanding outside of the sector, because for me, the careers leader or careers professional in a school or a college or a department is still very much an island kind of thing. It's very much, right, that's your job to do, and everybody else has obviously got all their other priorities to do and things like that, but A, they don't really recognize what it is, careers still, and B, they don't really recognize what their role is in doing that. And I think the only way in which we can get professionalism up the agenda is by starting to make sure that people understand what careers is and what it's about, and what the roles are in careers leadership and in careers guidance, and what careers guidance is these days too. Because I mean, when you do a Google search of the word definition of career, on the first page you'll get a number of different answers. Some that will still talk more about career for life, some that will talk more about career is just about earning more money and progressing, in terms of managerial roles. Some will talk more about a range of other aspects. Some will talk more about this journey element kind of thing, which is probably the closest to it these days. But also a society-wide issue this is, I think. It's not just in schools. It's about, most people will still think, well, my careers advice that I got when I was 10 or 12 or, year 10 or 12 or whatever kind of thing, was crap, it wasn't the best, and they told me to do this. Now that really isn't helpful kind of thing, because that's the expectation, that's what this careers service is about finding a role for somebody. And if that's the expectation, people are only going to be dissatisfied with the service, because that's something that we can't do. So it's more about an understanding what careers looks like in the 21st century, and understanding in the role that career professionals, guidance and educators, as well as the broader educators, have got the role to be able to do that. And I think the initial teacher training, is crucial to that, for there to be careers elements within that. And equally, more and more CPD, whole staff CPD, careers department isn't an island, it's for everybody.
Brilliant. Again, thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm going to have one more question that takes us away really from secondary, and brings us in more to the sort of lifelong element. One, particularly that the younger we start, unlike George, I didn't manage to get all my quotes lined up on slides. Well done for that. But there's one I remember that I think was partly to do with Jesuits within the Catholic Church. You give me a child till they're 7 and I've got them for life. And I always think about careers that the younger we start them thinking about their future, the better. We educate them quite young in this country. We take them in at 3 and 4 to do things. And the primary world is beginning. Again, John did make the point there will eventually be learning elements for Foundation, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and all the way through. We've also, I don't know how much, if anything, you know about them yourself, Tristan, or something, but we have come across something called QDOS career centres that are sort of going to set up around the country. Now, whether they link to the National Careers Service and also do the other end, because you say your career learning may not stop at 19, 25, 30, 35. I mean, I've changed career at sort of 55, 60, and well, part of it, instead of being employed, self-employed. So comments though about starting it younger, and obviously if then it will also mean that secondary schools need to liaise in a different manner with both those above, if you like, so colleges and HE, and those below. I'll start with you this time, Tristan, if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot in there.
There is a lot in there. Go on.
Yes, start young. Definitely start young. There's all the evidence in the world that tells you that's a good thing to do. Lots of people have kind of constrained their career choices quite a bit by the time they get to 11, and certainly by the time they get to 13. So the idea of starting in Key Stage 2, very good. I think careers education should really run from birth, but it needs to be appropriate. It needs to. It's the purpose of what you're doing with younger children is opening up opportunities, possibilities. You're not asking them to think about what they want to be. You're getting them to learn about the labour market, learn how a business works, how the economy works, that kind of thing. These things are all part of the discovering the world that should be at the heart of the primary curriculum. Absolutely. I think, it's easy to say that that's a good idea. Actually making that happen has proved very, very difficult. And what we've had is essentially a series of projects. Now, projects are useful. They give us ideas about what to do, but really we need to intervene more sort of substantially in the primary curriculum in order to make that happen, I think, rather than just kind of parachute the odd project in. So yeah, absolutely. But, I'm not sure it's completely on the agenda at the moment. My sense is that it's receded a bit. A couple of years ago, Careers and Enterprise were very interested in it. Nothing really about it in the white paper. It seems to have receded a bit. It's a great shame. In terms of the lifelong piece, I mean, one of the things we've been trying to do with this Cdi framework is to have a common lifelong framework which answers this question of, well, how can I be successful in my career? And then to think about how we articulate that in different contexts in ways that are appropriate. I think it's a great shame that higher education is not more engaged with school-based careers work, and so that the kinds of higher education careers programs and career services that go on are very disconnected from those that exist in schools and colleges. You know, they have a different professional association and so on. I think that's a problem. But, you know, definitely we want to try and create a lifelong system. It needs to be appropriate for the different ages and stages. So it you know, it needs, whatever we do needs to be rethought and re-articulated in each place. But you know, creating stronger links between schools and colleges, higher education, National Careers Service, the sort of things that go on within the private sector in the careers world and within organizations. You know, this definitely needs to happen, and you know, it's very difficult to make it happen, but you know, that's why we've been arguing for a careers strategy at a national level, really, that brings all of these things together in some way. So yes, I agree with all of that, really.
Thank you. George, do you want to make any comments? I'll leave you to last, John.
There's a great charity called Education and Employers, and some of their research recently is really promoting the idea of early career work being extremely effective. And from my point of view, I mean, the department I think I took over was very much going through the motions of you have a career event for year 11 and a career event for year 13, and that was sort of it, ticked off. I don't believe in that at all. I think it is a journey through there, as I was trying to say in my talk, 1,000 days, and it's about giving them opportunity. And if a boy has an idea that he wants to become an architect at in year 9, then he needs access to that stuff. He needs to have the opportunity of finding out about that. We need to try and get an architect into the school for him to meet and talk to. That's really what we're all about with that. And we also want to engage with our year 9s when they come in, because I want to know what their experience is. I need a baseline to understand what they understand when they come into the school, so that in a sense we know what is the raw material we're dealing with. Because we can't measure our impact if we don't know where we started from. So I think for all sorts of reasons, for me, career education, is the name I want to put, to describe working with, boys over a 5-year journey and beyond, to infinity and beyond, to use John's.
Infinity and beyond. Yeah.
Let's
John?
get that one in again.
Go on, John.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll start with the adult part and then come back to primary age learners. But I mean, I completely agree with Tristram. So what we need is a complete, all the way through career strategy, that looks at things out of the silos of just in secondary schools and FE colleges and stuff and into adulthood, but looks at everything all together and is cohesive and connected. So that's the starting point, really. I mean, and we know now, obviously, that people, the one certainty in life is change and transition kind of thing, all the way through life. And people need to learn the skills to be able to manage with that successfully. And that's what the framework, like the new Cdi framework, can help you to do, to recognize that change is constant, to see the bigger picture and all those things. And learning those competencies can help people to prepare for transition and change at any stage, really. So that has to be a centre to it. And obviously the joint up work between the Careers and Enterprise Company and the National Careers Service, I think can help to start to bridge that. The primary thing is something, I mean, George mentioned about the Education Employers Task Force there. I mean, the background is called Drawing the Future Report, and it's something so straightforward, but it's so hard hitting too. So looking at a lot of these barriers to career progression being deeply set in by age 7 kind of thing. And that's alarming, but is actually a reality as well for many. So this social mobility, the broadening horizons, raising aspirations needs to happen. I agree with Tristram, from birth, but equally, it's about the gender stereotypes too. So we've always been in a culture of pink or blue kind of thing from birth. So, why do we do that? We need to redress these kind of things. But I mean, fortunate to be part of, one of the Complete Careers partners, Mark Wilkinson, had a fantastic idea a few years ago to look at the way in which, to change the way in which we go with careers. And we started doing like a horrible histories meets careers kind of project. And Mark and I produced the book, and it was published. And it's called The Bonkers Book of Jobs. And it's just a great way to try and make careers fun and engaging. And it's really for kind of like age 8 to 12-year-olds, I guess. So it cuts across primary and secondary, but, you know, really passionate about that. It's about finding the right way to connect with learners to be able to get excited about the future. And the final thing I'll say is that, you know, we do have the Primary Career Mark Awards, and, you know, it is growing. And we started at Key Stage 2 because the learning outcomes were at Key Stage 2. But the primary schools really engage with careers. They really finds a way to bring things together and to raise aspirations. And we had a number of these primary schools that said, look, Key Stage 2 is just way too limiting here. We need outcomes at Key Stage 1 and at Foundation. So we wrote those, and that's something that we'll extend into the national pilot too. But we found ourselves now where we've got infant-only schools, so foundation schools, that have gone for and have been successful in accrediting with Career Mark Primary. And I think, for me, to be honest, that speaks volumes, really. So it's just about getting that more away from the exception and more to the rule, to be honest. Oh, you're on mute, Janet.
Sorry. Brilliant. I've put myself back in the sound. Thank you very much for that. That was brilliant. I'm not going to ask you any more questions, but everybody knows your contact details, I think. And if you want to look at the chat while I now summarise, you might be able to answer a few questions yourself. So I'm going to share my screen again now. Now, again, some of you may know me well enough that during this conference, obviously I've got a long background in education, a very, very long background in education. I've got a slightly shorter background in careers work, but that's 20 years this year. And while I've been listening, I've been putting together a few ideas and a few points from what has been said and written. So this is indeed very much something I didn't create yesterday. It's something I've been putting together today. So it's fairly rough around the edges, but I think it sums up some of what I believe in complete careers and hopefully what you've got out of today. So I'm going to try sharing my screen, Lucy. And let's hope it works from the current slide. Right, so we've just finished the question session and the panel. So summary and next steps is what I was asked to do, and I will do in about 15 minutes. As I've already said briefly, I'm fairly opinionated and quite judgmental. I've learned to be less so, but I'm not the best at that, nor am I very good at empathy, perhaps, and some of those other soft skills that the careers world actually needs a lot of. I was a secondary teacher and I joined Connections. So in the past, I've done Connections work and then supported, as I said, statutory career education. I was doing my secondary education in the early 70s. Well, I started them in the early 70s, and I went to what was a grammar school just turning into a comprehensive. Remember those bog standard comprehensives they once got called? Now, I therefore came from a sort of fairly working class background, but both my parents had qualified as teachers, probably as a result, certainly my father, because of the war and national service. I went through the education system. I went to university. I was probably the first. My other sibling didn't, you know, but I was inclined to go to uni and become a teacher. I sort of thought about becoming a lawyer, but my dad said, no, we haven't got the connections. He told me to become an engineer, but I thought, oh, I don't really want to do all that physics. So I actually became what he was at the time, a careers teacher. Now, then I worked in education and saw it develop. Exams became less important. O-levels were replaced by GCSEs. Coursework was the way in English we assessed young people. And lots of vocationally related qualifications, etc., came on board. And then, unfortunately, and this is where I'll be judgmental, Mr. Gove ended up back as careers in charge of education. And when they brought in the E-back, in some ways, or it was talked about on the core curriculum, I felt we took a very retrograde step. And I think we're still in some ways suffering from that. However, we have now got Gatsby. We have now got careers leaders. We have got the career professional development framework that Tristan talked about. And after a big dip, we are on the up again in some ways. Obviously, COVID has thrown everybody. That's not just in our country, I think it's in our entire world. And now, in the present, we have a new framework, which we've been delighted that Tristan is sharing with us. We also are a much smaller world than we used to be, that we can interact through these platforms like Zoom internationally. We already have links abroad, but as complete careers. At the moment, we're talking to somebody in Kenya who is a member of the CDI and looking to set up proper career programs in a country that is still a developing country. We've written stuff for the Lebanon. We've been along to Canada and seen what they do and had them here and know that other things are going on. So the present is quite lively, and it's about England, but also outside of Europe, but in the whole world. So what has the future got to tell us? It's up to you, really, in some ways, and us. But I think one thing we've heard today is that the careers world could do with a bit more strategy. I've called it structure there, but a bit more strategic thinking and joined up thinking, and also a little bit more money coming our way to help ensure it works. So what else do I think? I think we've got a bit of an issue still with how other people perceive the world of careers. In schools, as John has sort of said, and we know from academies particularly, maybe if you've got a MAT going now, you will have a decent careers team. Maybe if you're a very big college, you will have a decent careers team. But often secondary schools have a careers person or maybe two, and it can be quite isolating. So how many jobs are you doing? But we do want people to understand that there ought to be, if you like, a career department, ideally, a career leader who leads a subject area, possibly linked to citizenship or PSHE or whatever it's being called. But this is an area of learning. It isn't just an area of activity. So how do you put it into your curriculum like that? Again, Tristan talked about the range of tools we have. We have Gatsby, which is helpful. We have learning frameworks. We have professional bodies, etc. There is ICT, so we can communicate. But again, I think John has said, and again, I always remember this from when I came into this. I mean, and I suppose it was what I've always done. But what is it the needs of those individual learners? Analysis of learner needs is really important. And we know that different learners have very different needs. What is it that they come in? And I was interested there that George mentioned the word, you want a baseline about what knowledge your year nines have about the world of work and themselves, because again, I think the self-awareness is really, really crucial, self-awareness and self-development, because if we don't know ourselves, how can we know what we're going to be able to achieve, in a sense? So baseline is really, really important. And I think it's important whether they join you in year 7, in year 8, year 9, 6th form, 18. What do they know? What do they need to know? Student voice is important. Now, again, I spent most of my career and expected or hoped all of my career would remain in the public sector. That's who I am. But because of what happened to the connections and careers world, I've ended up a businesswoman. Yes, I'm a career educational professional, but I'm also running a business. And that's helped me sometimes to think about the world we work in as being more like a business. And schools are actually creating a product. They don't necessarily like to think of it like that, but every young person comes out of the school as a product of your education. Not just you, but you will have had maybe 5 years, maybe 6, 7, maybe more to influence that product. And I think that that's really important. And there has been, in my opinion, and you know I've got a lot of those, too much emphasis on the qualifications and not enough on the learners. So maybe we can take that away and think, what do my learners need? Again, we've got all these different things, and somebody mentioned we haven't really mentioned LLPs, but we are very aware of them. We try to work with them. We know some are a lot more supportive of schools than others, etc. We know we've got the Quality and Careers Standard. We've got the careers workforce. So can you encourage your school, work with others to do a little bit more joined up thinking, so that again, we're not working individually, but we're working together to make things better. And this is what hopefully we can then produce evidence for as well. Though I finally comment as well at the bottom there, that some of the evidence that was around when I joined the careers world 20 years ago is still very valid evidence, and unfortunately seems to get sort of forgotten sometimes. So what we're trying to do, clicked the wrong button, overexcited. We're trying to help young people and older people, if we're, thinking about it. George has said people come back and get support. Colleges will be working across a whole range of age groups. Schools may be able to support their own staff and the parents of their learners as well. So we're working for 21st century employment. And sometimes I think we're stuck in a bit of a 19th/20th century education system. And as careers professionals, we've got to help drag it appropriately into the 21st. And some of you, I'm not criticising any of you, because I'm sure by being here, your commitment and your beliefs are such. I'm talking to the converted in a way, but it's about how can you best do that for your learners. Haven High, again, a school where the socioeconomic backgrounds and the academic backgrounds of their learners tends to mean they have low aspirations and achievement levels. Using motivation, which is raising aspirations, you could see the work they were doing. As we've watched schools go back after the pandemic, I have seen a number of different attitudes. There's the attitude from some of the traditionally academic schools that we've just got to catch up on English, maths and science, which worries me, because these kids have had a traumatic experience, haven't we all, in some ways? And it's important that, yes, academic focus needs to be there, but it isn't, in my mind, the only or the be all and the end all. And I know you're all converts, but I'm just, I hope, stating it for all of us in the room. And also to remember that what keeps our world working, as we've seen in the pandemic, different types of people contribute to our economies and the functioning of our world. And while some of them are very, very highly skilled, there are some who may be much more so in a very practical way rather than a very academic way. For example, when we've been applauding the nurses and the doctors, we've also remembered the carers, who often aren't academic at all, but are hugely important. I've always been very aware that we've also not necessarily highlighted them, but the people who run, if you like, our utilities, the gas, the electric, the water, that kept coming and emptying our bins and did our recycling. Those people have kept our world functioning, whilst the scientists, who perhaps are the brains, have been creating the vaccines, if you like, and the tests to make sure we know whether we're positive or not. And then we've got the politicians, the media and the celebrities. And I mention all of those because during the pandemic, we've sort of seen in a way what their influence is. Do they talk to us daily? What do they tell us? What don't they tell us? How do they, what's the word, give it a slant? And then the celebrities, they have used them to encourage people, for example, and particular groups to get injections, the vaccination. If a celebrity does it, I'll do it. Now, I'm not sure you and I would necessarily agree with that, but if it works, it's a good route. And all those people are really important. So again, the purpose of education, and I think George mentioned this, is to find something you love if you can, and that you're good at, and that will contribute to your community in some way, shape or form, whether that's locally, nationally, internationally, and these days you never know, we might find somebody on Mars, so it might be interplanetary. Okay, I've probably nearly said enough. Motivating young people and knowing what they want as well, and if you've got to go back and persuade your senior management team, they'll say, oh yeah, this career stuff is all very well, but we've got to focus on the exams. Tell them over and over, and this is the oldest piece of evidence I've quoted, but there are others, motivation leads to improved results. If youngsters know why you're teaching them what they're teaching, and if they're sharing it, then they will be inspired to do the best they can in the subjects across the curriculum. So Careers Scotland did a report showing that back in 2004, not long after I joined the careers world. So I just thought I would reference that as we finish. You are all, I'm sure, I hope, inspired, as we thank again Tristram for speaking. We thank all the comments that have gone around. We thank John. We thank our support team who did a cracking job, Lucy and Peter, this morning to keep things going. And we thank you for your patience and your contribution. I know one or two of you have got fed up and gone home earlier, but that's me probably wittering, or it's lunchtime. What we're trying to do is empower people to make successful transitions and achieve their career potential. Thank you for being with us, and I think I'm going to stop sharing my slide and pass it over to Lucy, because we're going to finish off by her showing you that we're going to ask you to complete a questionnaire with feedback. You've got lots of addresses. By Monday, we hope the recording, etc., and presentations will be available for you all. Okay, thank you. 1 o'clock.